You're about to hear a story that might change the way you look at ordinary people. And before I tell you what an illiterate nanny saw, something that shocked doctors, wealthy families, and even the police, do one thing. Subscribe now to the $1 Million Stories channel. Here, each story feels like a streaming series, full of money, secrets, lies, and moral dilemmas that make you wonder, what would I do in their place? So click subscribe to $1 Million Stories. Activate the bell because when this story ends, you'll want to hear the next one. Now imagine this. It's night. The kitchen light is dim, yellow, one of those old-fashioned bulbs that make everything look like a 90s movie. The clock on the wall reads 10:47 p.m. The noise of the pressure cooker has stopped, but there's still a slight hiss, a lingering steam escaping. The living room television hums some random news program, talking about politics, corruption, millions embezzled from who knows where. The big city roars outside, horns, motorcycles, distant sirens, and seated in a plastic chair, her body tired and her thick hands resting in her lap, is Lourdes. Lourdes is 52 years old, but she looks older. Her face bears sunspots, deep wrinkles around her mouth, as if she had spent her whole life pressing her lips together to avoid saying everything she saw. Her hair is tied up in a makeshift bun with an elastic band that looks like it's about to break. Her nails are short, sometimes damaged, because she washes floors with strong disinfectant and has never known the meaning of the word moisturizing. Lourdes can't read. She can't write. She doesn't know how to use banking apps or even sign her own name properly. When she needs to sign, she makes a crooked drawing that she's been repeating since childhood, a kind of L that never comes out the same. But Lourdes knows something else. She knows how to look, and she knows how to sense when something is wrong. That no one has ever been able to take away from her. That day, however, Lourdes had no idea that her lack of education, her lack of diplomas would become precisely the reason why no one would believe what she was about to discover. She slowly rises from her chair, her back aching. She wipes her hand on her old apron, which is stained in ways that won't come out. She walks to the door of the room where the little one she cares for sleeps, on the other side of town, many kilometers away, in a luxurious penthouse where the floor shines so brightly it reflects the light from the LED spotlights. But our story doesn't begin at the mansion. It starts in the shack. In the small room that Lourdes calls home, there's a creaking double bed, a shelf with 3 pots and pans, a wardrobe with a crooked door, and an old radio that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. The window is a dented aluminum frame, with a broken pane of glass patched up with tape and cardboard. Outside, a dog barks, someone shouts another person's name, and distant funk music plays in the background. On the wooden table, there's something she's been staring at for minutes, a white envelope. The envelope arrived the day before, delivered by the postman, with handwriting she recognizes, the handwriting of Donna Verena, the wealthy employer, the mother of the baby she cares for. Lourdes feels a chill in her stomach whenever she receives something from that family. It's not fear, it's a kind of respect mixed with a threat, as if anything that comes from them could change her life in a way she can't control. The envelope has her name written on it in large, somewhat cramped letters, for Lourdes. She runs her finger across the paper as if caressing something dangerous. She squints. The letters make no sense. They are strange drawings. She knows there's something important there, but it's as if everything is locked behind thick glass. She thinks about tearing it up right away, taking the paper, throwing it away, pretending it never arrived. But she also remembers Verena's face, very pale, her hair always impeccable, straight blonde, the expensive perfume that fills the elevator, and her cold eyes, assessing everything. Verena doesn't like mistakes. Lourdes knows this. She takes a deep breath, picks up the envelope and puts it in her worn-out bag. She'll deal with it tomorrow, she thinks. Tomorrow is the day to go to the mansion, to take care of little Miguel. There. Maybe someone will read it to her. Maybe the doorman. Maybe the cook. Maybe. She turns off the light, lies down on the bed. The ceiling fan makes an irregular, irritating ticking noise. Outside, the city gradually fades to a quieter sound. Her thoughts become jumbled. The envelope, the baby, the tight salary, the electricity bill. A premonition, she doesn't know where it's coming from. She closes her eyes, and for some reason, the image that comes to mind is that of the baby, Miguel, staring blankly into nothingness as he had done 2 days before. An empty gaze unbecoming of a 9-month-old baby. A gaze she hasn't forgotten. She turns to her side, tries to sleep. She can't. The feeling is that something is out of place in the world, like a crooked picture on the wall that no one fixes. The next morning at 5:15 a.m., the alarm clock rings with a sharp sound. Lourdes gets up almost at the first chime. Waking up early is the only discipline life has taught her without any book. She puts water on to boil, makes strong black coffee, eats a stale bread roll with butter. She puts on her simple uniform, dark jeans, a white blouse, comfortable sneakers. She grabs her bag. The envelope is still inside, as if it had its own weight. She locks the door, checks it twice. She walks down the dark alley, breathes in the damp morning air. She takes a bus, then another. The journey to the upscale neighborhood is long, almost 2 hours. She passes neighborhood shops, then nicer apartment buildings, until finally she sees the place where the streets are wide, the sidewalks clean, and the imported cars gleaming in the sun. Verina's penthouse is in a tall building with a blue glass facade. The doorman already knows Lourdes. "Good morning, Mrs. Lourdes," he says, smiling somewhat wearily. "Good morning, Mr. Paulo," she replies, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. "It's been tough up there today. Mrs. Verina's husband arrived late. They had a party," he comments, in that tone of someone who shouldn't say anything, but speaks anyway. Lourdes only makes a sound with her throat, a short hum. She doesn't comment on her employers' lives. She's learned that this causes problems. Step up in the mirrored elevator. You see your own face multiplied on the walls. Dark, marked skin. The expression of someone who has seen a lot and has almost never been seen. The elevator beeps, the doors open. The corridor is silent, the marble floor gleaming. She rings the doorbell. On the other side, someone unlatches the door. It's the maid who sleeps on the job, Rafaela, her hair tied in a hurried ponytail. "Come in, Lou. The lady's inside, looking so..." She rolls her eyes. Lourdes enters, breathing in the house's scent, a mixture of expensive perfume, imported cleaning products, and something newer. Perhaps a cigarette smoker who shouldn't have smoked there. The living room is enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows. The morning sun floods everything, but the curtains are half closed as if the house wanted to protect itself from the light. "Where's the little one?" Lourdes asks. "In the room, still with the night nanny. Verena wouldn't let her leave. She felt insecure because of yesterday's fever," Rafaela replies, already heading to the kitchen. "Fever?" Lourdes' heart leaps. "Oh, honey, he was a little warm yesterday. The lady was desperate, calling the pediatrician, all that fuss. But then it seems to have gone back to normal," Rafaela says while opening the refrigerator. Lourdes wastes no time. She goes straight to the hallway, her steps sinking lightly into the expensive carpet. She knows the way like the back of her hand. Miguel's room is the third on the right. The door is ajar. She taps it twice, slowly. "May I come in?" The night nanny, a younger woman named Bruna, is sitting in the nursing chair, her cell phone in hand. Her eyes are tired with deep dark circles under them. The baby is in the crib, turned on its side, a light blue blanket covering its belly. "Oh, Mrs. Lourdes, thank God," Bruna whispers. "I'm exhausted. The lady freaked out yesterday. She wanted a doctor here at 2 in the morning." "And why?" Lourdes approaches the crib. Bruna shrugs. "She said he was looking at her strangely. But you know how it is. She thinks it's the end of the world over anything." She yawns. "I'm going to grab a quick coffee, okay? Then I'll leave." Lourdes can barely hear. She's focused on only one thing: the baby. Miguel is lying down, his fine brown hair sticking slightly to his forehead with sweat. His cheeks are flushed more than usual, but it's not a healthy red. It's a strange blush. His breathing is rapid, his chest rises and falls quickly, and his eyes, even closed, something in them seems tense. She rests her hand on his forehead. It's hot, yes. Not burning, but too hot for her liking. "Hi, my prince," she whispers, her voice full of affection. "Nanny Lourdes has arrived." She speaks softly, as if asking permission to care for him. The baby doesn't respond, doesn't smile, doesn't move much. Only his breathing is rapid, his chest rising and falling. Lourdes notices something that other people might not. Miguel's hands are slightly purple at the tips of his fingers. It's not a deep purple, but it's as if the blood isn't circulating properly. She takes one of those little hands and squeezes it gently. The skin takes a little longer than it should to return to its normal color. She frowns. This isn't right. She calls Bruna back. "Did you see his little hands?" she asks, pointing. Bruna approaches, looks over the crib, but all she sees is a baby who appears to be sleeping. "Oh, Mrs. Lourdes, that's normal. He slept badly last night, cried a lot." The lady kept putting him in the air conditioning, then taking him out, putting him back in again. "This boy is going to catch a cold from all this fuss." She shakes her head. "But look closely," Lourdes insists. "He's breathing. He's very tired. And this little purple mark here." Bruna shrugs again. "Mrs. Lourdes, you know more about these children's things than I do. I'm exhausted. If you think you need to call a doctor, call the lady. I'm leaving, otherwise I'll miss the bus." She leaves the room almost stumbling, she's so tired. She leaves Lourdes alone with the baby. Lourdes pulls up a chair and sits beside the crib. She stays there, observing. She remembers other babies she cared for. She remembers her grandson, who died at 3 months old years ago on a silent night, when no one believed her when she said, "Something's wrong. He's breathing strangely." That time the doctor was late. When he arrived, he looked down, listened to the heart with a stethoscope and said it was normal, that children make noises, that it was just a cold. He told her to give him syrup and pray. In the morning, her grandson wasn't breathing anymore. Lourdes never forgot. That's why when she sees Miguel's chest rising and falling like that, something inside her stirs. "No, not with you," she murmurs, feeling her throat burn. She gets up, goes to the window, opens the curtain a little to let in more air. The light illuminates the baby's face, and that's when she sees it. For a second, everything stops. Miguel's right eye, which had been partially closed, opens slightly, as if he were trying to wake up. But his gaze doesn't focus on anything. The pupil seems slow, as if there were a delay between the movement and the response. And then, in less than a second, the baby makes a strange movement with its left arm. It's not a stretch. It's not a startle. It's a quick, involuntary tremor, as if a shock had passed through it. A spasm. The left side of his lip trembles slightly, in a movement that doesn't match the rest of his face. Lourdes feels her heart racing. She's seen this before. In another house with another child years ago. A girl who started with small, almost imperceptible tremors. The family thought it was tantrums, that it was nervousness. Months later, they discovered a serious neurological problem. But by then, the girl had already lost so much. "No," Lourdes whispers, moving closer, almost sticking her head inside the crib. She gently takes the baby in her arms. Miguel is light, but the weight she feels is of a different kind, the weight of responsibility. She rests his head on her arm, runs her hand down his back, feels his warm, tense body. "My love, look at Lourdes," she says, bringing her face very close to his, almost touching. "Look at me." For a moment, his left eye tries to focus. His right eye, however, seems to lag behind, as if it didn't want to obey. Lourdes feels a shiver run up the back of her neck. She knows something is wrong. She doesn't know the technical term. She can't explain it in fancy words. She can't write it down. But what she feels in her stomach, that cold feeling, that certainty without a diploma, it's too strong to ignore. She hears the sound of high heels in the hallway. It's Verena. The boss enters the room as if she were stepping onto a stage. She looks impeccable, even at 8 in the morning. A dark blue silk dress, a discreet but clearly expensive necklace, her hair loose and brushed, light makeup as if she woke up early and already looked ready for an important meeting. The perfume reaches the room before she does. "Lourdes, thank God you're here," she says, her voice controlled but with a hidden tremor. "I haven't slept since yesterday." She quickly approaches the crib and notices that Lourdes is already holding the baby in her arms. "Is he better?" she asks anxiously. Lourdes takes a deep breath. She knows that from now on, any word can change something. She speaks carefully, but doesn't hide her concern. "Mrs. Verena, I think there's something wrong with the little one." Verena's eyes widen. "What do you mean, wrong?" "Yesterday, the pediatrician said we just needed to observe him. He had a fever, but then he fell ill and—" "It's not just the fever," Lourdes interrupts, not wanting to sound disrespectful. "His breathing is different. It's very rapid. And I saw a little tremor." She demonstrates with her hand. "On this side here, very slightly, and his little hands, they're turning purplish at the tips. I think he's getting tired of breathing. Verena holds the baby by the feet, as if she wanted to get a better look at the color of its skin. Purple? She repeats, her voice faltering. She doesn't like feeling afraid. Verena is one of those people who like to control everything. She has a spreadsheet for trips, a spreadsheet for diets, a spreadsheet for investments, and having a child was something she decided on when all other aspects of her life were already organized. It wasn't in her plans to feel like she could lose that control. I noticed it yesterday, she confesses, with an almost guilty tone. He was looking strangely, as if one eye was following and the other wasn't. I called the pediatrician. She said it was tiredness, that it was my imagination. But I know my son... She stops, looks at Lourdes, close enough to smell the nanny's coffee breath. Do you really think you have something serious? Lourdes holds his gaze. She knows her place in that house. She knows that in the hierarchy her word is worth less than any report, any doctor, any wealthy neighbor. But still, she answers, I think so. I don't think it's something to wait for. If it were my son, I'd already be at the hospital. The words hang heavy in the air. Verena glances at the phone on her bedside table. She thinks about her busy schedule for the day, a meeting with an investment fund, lunch with an influential friend, a meeting with her husband's company lawyer. She thinks about the doctors she can afford, the best hospitals, and at the same time, a shadow passes across her face, a shadow of doubt, not about what Lourdes is saying, but about something else, something deeper, more complex. Lourdes, she begins slowly. Yesterday, my husband said something. She doesn't finish the sentence. Her voice fades, as if it were dangerous to put it into words. Lourdes observes. She sees something in that pause that she doesn't fully understand, but she feels it, a kind of secret. Verena shakes her head, as if banishing a thought. I'm going to call the pediatrician again, she decides, and my brother too. He knows a great neurologist. If it's something neurological, we can look into it right now. She picks up the phone and starts typing. Meanwhile, the baby in Lourdes's lap makes another small, strange movement, a slight contraction on one side of its body, almost invisible. But Lourdes sees it. She presses the baby a little tighter against her chest, as if she wants to protect him from the whole world. At that moment, she doesn't know it, but from that suspicion, that feeling that no one could measure with an examination, a chain of events is being triggered. A sequence that will involve money, power, lies, medical negligence, and a dilemma so heavy that later, many people will say that Lourdes should have kept quiet. But for now, she's just an illiterate nanny, holding a sick baby, trying to be heard in a house where everything is expensive, except her voice. Hours later, the sun is already high when Verena returns to her room with her cell phone still in her hand. I spoke with the doctor, she says, trying to remain calm. She's coming here. She wasn't too happy that I called again, but I insisted. And the neurologist has an appointment in 2 days. She thinks it's excessive, but I don't want to take any chances. Lourdes feels a partial sense of relief. 2 days still seems like a long time, but at least someone will be looking. Mrs. Verena, she says carefully, I'm sorry if I'm interfering, but 2 days is a long time when the problem is mental, isn't it? When it's breathing like this, different. Couldn't you have taken her today? Verena closes her eyes for a second. She's exhausted. She didn't sleep well. And then there's the invisible pressure from her husband, Gustavo, a businessman known on TV as the King of Acquisitions, a man who profits by buying nearly bankrupt companies, dismantling them and selling them in parts. He has a cold way of seeing the world. Everything is cost and benefit. The previous night, when she got out of bed 3 times to check on the baby, Gustavo complained, You're being neurotic, Verena. It's just a fever. Stop making things up. The pediatrician already said it's normal. We pay a lot for her care, don't we? When she mentioned that Miguel's gaze seemed out of place, he was harsher. You're anxious about the company, and you're projecting that onto the boy. Relax. And honestly, if we start chasing after doctors for every little thing, this boy will become a hospital project. He's healthy, period. Now, in the room, facing Lourdes, she feels 2 opposing forces. On one side, the maternal instinct. On the other, the habit of obeying the voices that have more power, more education, more money. Let's wait for the doctor to arrive, she decides. If she thinks it's serious, we'll go to the hospital right away. Is that okay? Lourdes swallows hard. It's not the answer she wanted, but it's better than nothing. Yes, ma'am. Time passes, minutes that seem like hours. With each slight tremor, each heavier breath, Lourdes' chest tightens. She paces back and forth across the room with the baby in her arms, knowing that light movement sometimes calms her, sometimes helps her breathe better. She softly sings an old song, a lullaby her mother used to sing in the countryside many years ago. Right now, if you've watched this video this far, let me tell you something. Stories like this really happen in rich and poor homes. And that's why on this channel, Stories of Millions, we go deep to where nobody wants to look. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Subscribe to Stories of Millions now, because the part of this story that's coming up next will blow your mind. And of course, if you're already subscribed, leave a like so this video reaches more people. The doorbell rings. The sound echoes through the big house. Rafaela will answer the door. A few seconds later, Verena enters the room accompanied by a woman in her 40s, wearing a white lab coat, her hair tied in a perfect bun, light makeup, and a look that suggests she has no time to waste. It's Dr. Elisa, a renowned pediatrician with a highly sought-after schedule among the residents of that neighborhood. She enters with her stethoscope already hanging around her neck, tablet in hand, and a calm expression on her face. "Good morning, Lourdes," she greets with a professional smile. "How are you?" "Good morning, doctor," Lourdes replies, squeezing the baby a little tighter. "Doctor, thank you for coming again." Verena hurries, almost apologetically. "I know you calmed us down yesterday, but I couldn't stay calm. And Lourdes understood some things too." Elisa approaches the baby, who is still in Lourdes' lap. "May I?" he asks, extending his arms. Lourdes hesitates for a second. Something inside her doesn't want to let go, but she forces herself. She hands over the baby slowly. Elisa holds the little one carefully, making practiced movements. She looks at the color of his skin, listens to his breathing, places the stethoscope on his chest, and counts the rhythm of his breathing. "My breathing is a little faster, but within the expected range for my age," she murmurs almost to herself. She checks for a fever with an ear thermometer. A beep, a number appears. 37.8, a little above, but not a high fever. She opens Miguel's mouth, looks at his throat, examines his eyes with a small flashlight. When she shines the light into his eyes, it's impossible not to notice. One of his eyes follows the light with a slight delay. Anyone paying close attention notices. Anyone thinking about something else doesn't. Lourdes is paying attention, and she sees, and her stomach clenches again. "Did you see?" she says suddenly, unable to hold back. "That little eye. It's not the same, doctor." Elisa looks away from the baby for a second and stares at Lourdes. It's a short, almost impatient look, but one covered by a layer of professional politeness. "Hi," she says, as if she hadn't heard properly. "The little eye," Lourdes insists, pointing. "When you turn on the light, one eye follows and the other lags behind. I saw that with another boy I looked after. Later, they discovered something wrong with his head." The room falls silent for a moment. Verena looks at the doctor, waiting for confirmation. Something in her face shows that she too has noticed something strange, but doesn't feel entitled to say so. Elisa takes a deep breath. She's used to it. Terrified mothers experience nannies, people who read too much on the internet, people who don't read at all. She knows that if she lets herself be carried away by every fear, she'll never leave the house again. "Lourdes," she begins in a calm, almost didactic tone. "These little tremors, these subtle delays, can happen when the baby is tired, has a fever, or is uncomfortable. Their nervous system is still maturing. It doesn't necessarily mean there's something serious." "But doctor," Verena interjects, her voice trembling slightly, "what if it is? What if it's something neurological? I called my brother. He mentioned a pediatric neurologist." Elisa holds Verena's gaze. She doesn't like to see the panic growing. Panic is bad. It makes people make rash decisions. And more than that, she has an image to protect. A successful upper-class doctor with influential clients. She can't appear to not know what she's doing. "Verena, I understand your concern," he says firmly. "But so far, from what I'm seeing here, there's nothing to indicate a serious neurological condition. What I see is a child with a slight fever, perhaps a little dehydrated and tired. It's very common for coordination to be a little impaired under these conditions. These small tremors could be benign childhood myoclonus, which resolve on their own. Lourdes clenches her fingers nervously. The difficult words wash over her like a warm wind. What? She asks, confused. Myoclonus, Elisa repeats with a smile that mixes condescension and patience. They are rapid muscle spasms, usually not serious. Many children have them. It's not epilepsy. It's not something in your head. Nothing like that. But my grandson, Lourdes begins, her voice breaking. My grandson started like this. He trembled on one side. The doctor said it was normal, that I was just being fussy. Then, she can't finish. The image of the small, lifeless body returns with too much force. Elisa sighs. She doesn't want to be cruel, but she also doesn't want a nanny's tragic personal story to define the course of a wealthy family with whom she has an important professional relationship. I'm so sorry for what happened to your grandson, truly, she says sincerely. But every case is different. If we start comparing everything to the worst thing we've ever seen, nobody will survive. Verena runs her hand through her hair, uneasy. Doctor, so what do we do? He asks. Just watch. Wait. Elisa stares at the baby again. For a few seconds, she really thinks more deeply. She does see something strange. She sees a detail or two that might warrant investigation. But in the invisible balance of her mind, other things weigh in. Statistics, probabilities, reputation, her busy schedule. The chance of it being something serious is small. And even if it is, a day or two won't make that much of a difference. That's how she rationalizes. My recommendation is observation, she says firmly. We'll control the fever, keep him well hydrated. I'll prescribe an antipyretic, some mild pain medication if needed. If it worsens, very high fever, obvious seizures, extreme drowsiness, refusal to eat, then yes, we rush to the hospital. But at this moment, rushing to the emergency room will only expose him to viruses, bacteria, a whole lot of things. He's better off here at home, under observation. Lourdes feels a weight in her chest, increasing instead of decreasing. Doctor, she tries once more in a last effort. I'm sorry, I know I didn't study, but when I hold him, I feel like something's wrong. I feel it in my body, you know? It's not just in my head. I can't explain it, but it's wrong. He's different. Elisa's eyes harden slightly. Lourdes, I greatly respect your experience, she says, but now her voice has a hint of irritation. But medicine isn't about feeling. It's science. It's about physical examination, symptoms, and signs. If we make decisions based on feeling, everything turns into chaos. Verena looks from one to the other. She's in the middle of a force field. On one side, the gentle, insistent, almost spiritual force of Lourdes. On the other, the technical, confident, and legitimate force of Elisa. It's as if there were an angel and an instruction manual vying for space. She takes a deep breath. Doctor, what if we did at least one test? A CT scan, I don't know, something like that, just to be sure. Elisa closes the tablet as if to end the discussion. Verena, I can't just order complex tests like that without a clear indication, he replies. CT scans, MRIs, those are tests with sedation, radiation, and risk. You know, you're an intelligent woman. Everything has a cost and a benefit. Right now, the cost is greater than the benefit. The word cost resonates with Verena. She lives in a world where everything is about cost, return, and calculated risk. This language speaks to her on a familiar level. Lourdes, however, hears that same word with a different weight. For her, cost is what you pay when you lose someone for trusting too much in someone who didn't want to listen. She lowers her eyes. She feels a mixture of helplessness and anger, an anger she rarely lets out, but inside something begins to boil. Elisa says goodbye, leaving digital prescriptions and general instructions. He says he'll text later to see how Miguel is doing. She leaves the room, then the house, taking with her the scent of hospital and authority. Verena stands still for a few seconds in the middle of the room. The silence is heavy. So that's it, she says, more to herself than to Lourdes. It's about observing. She approaches the nanny. Lourdes, I trust you a lot, you know, he says, lightly touching her shoulder. But I also trust the doctor. She's one of the best in the country. If she says it's not serious, she lets the sentence die. Lourdes looks at her, and, for the first time in years working in that house, she thinks about disobeying. She thinks about taking the baby in her arms, walking out that door and going straight to the hospital, with or without permission. But reality hits her like a stone. She is not the child's mother. She is nobody, on paper. If she does that, she loses her job, maybe faces police trouble, a lawsuit. And worse, they might not even let her into the hospital with the boy. She bites the inside of her lip. "Yes, Mom," she replies softly. Verena leaves the room, saying she's going to take a quick shower and try to eat something. She leaves Lourdes alone with Miguel again. She picks up the baby and sits in the armchair. The silence is broken only by the clock on the wall. Tick, tock, tick, tock. She feels the warmth of his body through his uniform, the way he breathes quickly, without crying, as if he doesn't even have the strength to complain. His little hand lightly grasps the fabric of her shirt, but without much coordination. Lourdes feels a tear trickle down the corner of her eye, but she quickly wipes it away. She won't cry now, she'll stay alert. More alert than any doctor could imagine. She doesn't know how to read the medical reports, but she knows how to read that baby's body. And what she is reading right now is a warning that if ignored will be costly, much more expensive than any exam, any hospitalization, any consultation at a luxury hospital. But for now, inside that expensive house, the cheapest thing remains the nanny's intuition. Outside, the city goes on. On the living room TV, a news report talks about millions embezzled from a public health scheme. Nobody pays much attention, but it's almost ironic. There, in a house that could pay for all the tests in the world, a baby's health is being put to the test because of something else: ego, vanity, arrogance. Lourdes kisses Miguel's forehead, closes her eyes for a second as if saying a silent prayer. She has no idea that in just a few hours she will see something so terrifying, so out of the ordinary, that it will make her scream for help. Something that, when she tells the doctors, many won't believe. They'll think it's an exaggeration, something that came up in the mind of an uneducated nanny. But you'll be here to hear what she saw. So, you'll have to decide. If it were you, in her place, would you stay silent? Before I continue this story in the next part, remember to subscribe to the $1 Million Stories channel. Here we go where nobody wants to go, inside the heads and hearts of ordinary people facing gigantic decisions. Subscribe to $1 Million Stories now, because in part 2, what Lourdes sees with her own eyes will challenge logic, medicine, and the power of an entire family. You're still here. That says a lot about you. Stories like this aren't easy to hear, and even less so to tell. Before continuing, do one quick thing. Subscribe now to the Millions of Stories channel. Here, we tell real stories, or stories inspired by real life, with the same dramatic force as an expensive streaming series, but with one difference. In the end, you always ask yourself, what if it were me? What would I do? If you're already subscribed, just make sure to like this video to support it, and let's keep going. The digital clock in the room reads 11:02. The sun beats down brightly outside, but Miguel's room remains dimly lit, the curtains partially closed. The air conditioning hums at a perfect temperature of 22 degrees. Nothing seems out of place. The room is beautiful. Expensive crib, ergonomic rocking chair, hypoallergenic rug, baby monitor camera lit with a discreet blue light. There's only one thing wrong with that perfect scenario: the baby. Lourdes feels it in her arm. Outside, Verena talks on the phone, pacing back and forth across the room. Okay then, I'll text you if anything comes up. No, the doctor said it doesn't seem serious. Yeah, I know, but you know Gustavo, right? He thinks anything that doesn't fit on the spreadsheet is a drama. She laughs awkwardly, but the laughter dies quickly. Inside, Lourdes is alone with Miguel. Again. She's already changed his diaper, tried offering him a bottle, changed his position in her lap, opened the curtains wider to let in light, closed them a little so as not to disturb him. Nothing calms that silent strangeness. It's as if Miguel were fighting with his own body. He doesn't cry loudly, he doesn't kick and scream, he doesn't make the typical fuss of a baby with an earache or hunger. It's worse. It's a quiet weariness. A deep sigh now and then, a look that tries to wake up but fails. Lourdes looks at his little hand again. The tips of my fingers are more purplish now. This isn't normal, she whispers, feeling her chest tighten even more. She lays the baby on its side in a position she learned from a nurse years ago to make breathing easier. She places her hand behind the baby's back, supporting it with almost sacred care. "Take it easy, my prince. Breathe with Lourdes," she says, almost as if she were teaching an adult. She inhales through her nose, exhales through her mouth as if he could imitate her. He doesn't imitate. His chest keeps rising too quickly. She looks at her little face. Her skin, once too pink, is starting to look different. It's not exactly pale. It's a strange mix of red and grey, as if the blood doesn't know where to go. Lourdes feels her stomach churn. She looks down the hallway. "Mrs. Verena," she calls out loudly but without shouting. Nothing. She can still hear her boss's voice on speakerphone, awkwardly laughing about something work-related. She looks at the baby again, and then it happens. First, it's only a second that feels like a year. The left side of Miguel's body stiffens. It's not a stretch, it's not a reflex, it's a sudden stiffness. His left arm stiffens, his hand clenches into a fist, as if he were trying to grasp something that isn't there. His right side feels strange, almost too relaxed. The left lip trembles, then pulls down slightly. The left eye fixates on a point on the wall. The law doesn't keep up. It's as if one side of the baby is shutting down, while the other is still trying to stay on. And then comes a small, quick, repetitive tremor, only on one side. Lourdes feels her throat tighten. She knows this movement well. She knows it too well. "No, no, no," she says loudly, already getting up from the chair. Her heart is racing. It's her body reacting before her mind. She holds the baby's head more firmly with one hand, and with the other tries to open his little mouth slightly to the side, as she saw them do with her grandson, so he doesn't choke on saliva. "Mrs. Verena," now she shouts, "Mrs. Verena." Her voice rips through the hallway. In the room, Verena interrupts the sentence midway. "What? Lourdes?" She drops the phone on the sofa and runs down the hallway. When she enters the room, she sees a scene that will haunt her nightmares for a long time. The baby in Lourdes' lap has his eyes rolled back, his arms stiff, his breathing held for a few seconds, then too rapid, as if he had just run a marathon and couldn't catch his breath. "Oh my God, what's happening?" Verena screams, her mask of strength crumbling all at once. Lourdes doesn't use technical terms. She doesn't, and she doesn't need them. "He's convulsing, Mrs. Verena," she blurts out, her voice breaking. "I've seen this before, I've seen this before." And the phrase resonates. "I've seen this before." It echoes in Verena like a siren. It echoes back to the day she heard from the pediatrician. If she has a seizure, then it's serious. It echoes with the weight of all the things she didn't want to believe, of all the small signs she thought were exaggerated. "Call an ambulance, call the hospital, call someone," she yells, grabbing her cell phone, her hands trembling so much she almost drops it. Lourdes holds the baby on its side, keeping its head aligned, as if an ancient instinct guided every gesture. The tremor, which lasted about 20 or 30 seconds, begins to subside, but the stiffness is still there, one side harder, the other softer. When the seizure stops, what comes next is almost worse. Miguel becomes too soft. Eyes half open but not looking at anything, mouth slightly open. Breathing returns, but now with a slight wheezing sound, like a breath scratching the throat. The whole body feels heavy. Is he unconscious?" Verena asks desperately. "Miguel, son, look at mommy." Nothing. Lourdes feels a lump rising in her throat. "He's coming out of the crisis," she says, trying to sound calmer than she is. "But this isn't normal. This isn't baby stuff. He needs to go to the hospital now." The "now" comes out with a force that Lourdes never had the courage to use in that house. Verena, trembling, dials the pediatrician's number first, on reflex. Party, party, party. Nothing. "Answer, doctor. For God's sake, answer," she murmurs, pacing in circles. Lourdes looks at the phone, looks at the baby. "Call an ambulance, Mrs. Verena. It's an emergency," she insists. "Then talk to whoever you want. But first, the hospital. This boy can't wait." Verena hesitates for 2 seconds. 2 seconds in which her mind tries to find an organized, controlled, protocol-compliant alternative. But then she looks at her son's face, limp, strange, pale. 2 seconds is enough. She types 192. The voice of the SAMU, Brazilian Emergency Medical Service operator, enters the room. Mobile Emergency Care Service, good morning. Verena speaks in a rushed, disorganized manner. My son, he's a baby. He had a seizure. I think he had a fever. Now he's limp. I live on Rua. While she speaks, Lourdes can only see the color of Miguel's mouth. It's starting to turn purplish. It's not just the fingertips. It's the mouth. The shiver she feels has no name. She holds the baby closer, but carefully so as not to suffocate him. She brings his face close to hers, as if she wanted to share her own air. Breathe, my love. Breathe, please, as she whispers. The SAMU operator asks, is he breathing? Is his chest rising and falling? Verena looks desperately at Lourdes. Lourdes! She presses her face very close to Miguel's mouth and nose. She feels a faint, uneven breath. Okay, but it's weak. It's very weak, she replies to the empty space, knowing Verena will repeat it. Verena repeats, almost crying. The attendant advises, keep the child on their side in a well-ventilated area and don't put anything in their mouth. The team is already on their way. How old is the child again? 9 months, Verena replies, her voice breaking. If he stops breathing completely, you need to start resuscitation maneuvers. Do you know how to do them? Verena looks at Lourdes again, as if she were a living manual. Lourdes swallows hard. She's seen it done. She's seen nurses. She's seen doctors, in adults, in children, but she's never done it herself. If you need me to, I'll do it, she says without much thought. Her voice comes firmly from a place within her that even she didn't know existed. Verena collapses to her knees on the floor, next to the armchair. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. She begins to repeat it like an automatic mantra, the tears finally falling, smudging her expensive mascara, ruining her perfect makeup. Lourdes doesn't cry. She doesn't have that luxury for now. From that point on, time gets strange. It looks like someone is squeezing the seconds, stretching and shrinking them as they please. 1 minute feels like a century. Rafaela appears at the door, startled. What happened? She asks, seeing Verena on the floor and Lourdes with the baby in her arms. Call Gustavo, Verena orders without looking. Now. Tell him to come to the hospital. Now. It doesn't matter where he is. Rafaela runs. Lourdes feels the baby's body is still somewhat limp, but she notices a change, a small moan. It's low, almost a different kind of sigh, but it's something. She clings to it as if it were a rope thrown into an abyss. That's it, my love. Talk to Lourdes, she says, her voice breaking. The elevator beeps downstairs. The doorman announces over the intercom that the ambulance has arrived. The distant sound of the siren invades the quiet street, shattering the bubble of security in that neighborhood that considers itself untouchable. Within minutes, 2 paramedics enter the room, green uniforms, large backpacks on their backs, eyes trained not to panic. Good afternoon, is he the patient? One of them asks, already approaching. It's my son. Verena jumps up. He had a seizure, the nanny saw it, he went stiff, then limp. He had a fever yesterday, the pediatrician came, said it was nothing. The words come out like an avalanche. The paramedic, Carlos, wastes no time. He carefully picks up the baby in his arms and places him on a flat surface, the changing table itself. He begins to assess breathing, oxygen saturation, color. He places the oximeter on Miguel's little finger. The device beeps, and a number appears on the display. Verena tries to peek, but she doesn't understand anything. Lourdes doesn't know what oxygen saturation means, but she recognizes the paramedic's worried tone. Saturation 88, 89. That's low for his age, he says to his colleague. Let's oxygenate. He takes a small mask, connects it to a portable cylinder, and gently places it over Miguel's face. The sound of the oxygen filling the mask seems, at that moment, like the most beautiful sound in the world. Lourdes watches, her heart pounding. Does he have something wrong with his lungs? She ventures to ask. Carlos responds with professional speed. but looks at Lourdes as if she were more involved than many other family members. It could be many things: a neurological condition with respiratory complications, an infection, a seizure, but we can't tell here. He needs a hospital, an examination. Let's go to the nearest one with a pediatric ICU. Verena holds her own head. I'll pay for any hospital, anyone, just tell me which one is the best, she says, already pulling her card out of her purse as if money could solve oxygen saturation. The closest one with adequate facilities is San Gabriel, the other paramedic replied. They have a good pediatric ICU, let's go there. Will you come with us in the ambulance? Verena hesitates for a second. She looks at Lourdes, whose eyes are glued to the baby. You go, Lourdes, she blurts out suddenly. You know how to handle him. You know how to control him. You know how to calm him down. I'll follow in my car, talk to Gustavo, to my mother, to the doctor. I'll take care of things outside. But I want him with someone he knows. Lourdes feels her legs trembling. She never rode in an ambulance. She never entered a high-complexity hospital as the primary caregiver. She never had that kind of official responsibility. She was always the babysitter who helps out. But in that second, no one there seemed more capable than her of standing by that baby. I'll go, she replies without thinking twice. The paramedics place little Miguel on a tiny, adapted stretcher with delicate straps. An oxygen mask covers his face. The color of his mouth improves slightly. His oxygen saturation rises to 92, 93. He's responding, Carlos comments, in a neutral tone, but to someone who is desperate, it sounds like there is hope. They leave in a hurried procession. First the stretcher, then Lourdes, then Verena, then Rafaela, with an improvised backpack containing documents, a diaper, anything. In the elevator, everyone breathes together with the baby. When the doors open in the garage, the sound of the siren returns, louder. The building gate opens, the ambulance already running, ready to go. Outside, some neighbors discreetly look out the windows. People comment on car brands, the price per square meter, but rarely look at the human side of life. Some film with their cell phones. No one approaches. Lourdes gets into the ambulance next to Miguel. Verena stands outside for a moment, paralyzed. Go, Lourdes. Stay with him, he repeats, almost like an order, almost like a plea. The doors slam. The sound of the world changes. Inside the ambulance, it's another universe. The sound of a heart monitor beeping. The internal radio speaking codes that Lourdes doesn't understand. The oxygen cylinder releasing air. The different swaying of the vehicle at high speed. She holds the side of the stretcher with one hand and with the other reaches for the baby's foot under the blanket just to touch it, so he knows she's there. What is your relationship to him? Carlos asks while checking his blood pressure and jotting things down on a form. Lourdes opens her mouth. Date. She means almost everything. But answer what society allows. Me? I'm the babysitter. Carlos looks at her for a little longer. Well, she looks like a mother, you see, he says innocently, simply stating what he sees. Lourdes felt her eyes welling up with tears for the first time that day. She doesn't answer. The ambulance tears through the streets. It runs red lights, enters bus lanes, and dodges cars trying to take advantage of the same route. The world outside becomes a blur. Inside, the monitor displays the baby's heart rate. Tum, 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 quick, but present. Lourdes follows that rhythm as if it were an old song, as if each beat were directly connected to her own heart. She thinks about everything at once. Think about the envelope that's still in her purse, forgotten at her employer's house. Think about her grandson who didn't survive. He thinks about how once again a doctor downplayed her intuition. He wonders if Miguel will survive. He thinks that if something happens, she'll never forgive herself for not being more aggressive, more insistent. If I had picked up that boy and gone straight to the hospital yesterday. Guilt comes in waves, but she pushes it away. Not now. Now she can only do one thing. Be there. They arrive at San Gabriel Hospital. Automatic door, smell of disinfectant, and excessively cold air. The people at reception turned around when they saw the stretcher with the baby. Pediatric emergency, shouts the paramedic, and a nurse runs to meet them. They enter through a different door, not the reception desk. Lourdes tries to follow, but a nurse holds her arm. Are you related? The mechanic asks. The question hits like a punch. Lourdes swallows the truth. I am from the house. she replies, unsure of what term to use. Mother, father, legal guardian? The nurse insists. Lourdes watches the stretcher being pushed into a room, the door almost closing. She feels a despair that she can't explain. It's not possession. It's a bond. His mother is coming after him. I work for her. I take care of him, she tries to explain, her words stumbling. The nurse makes a practical gesture, practice to avoid getting involved. You can wait there, please. We'll call you when your mother arrives. And it is there that Lourdes discovers something harsh. The person who saw that baby most closely, who noticed the changes most, who risked her own voice the most for him, has no voice at all in the face of the system. She obeys. She sits in a cold plastic chair, her hands trembling. She watches the stretcher disappear through the door. She sees doctors and nurses pass by with clipboards, tablets, in a hurry. The wall clock reads 11:38. She rests her elbows on her knees, her face in her hands. Inhale, exhale. Minutes later, Verena enters, breathless, her high heels clicking on the hospital floor, her purse slung across her chest, her hair disheveled as she never lets it be. Where is he? Where is my son? She asks, already approaching the reception area. The nurse who held Lourdes points. She's in the pediatric emergency room. Are you the mother? Yes, I am, she replies, her voice firm. Verena Antunes. Please provide your documents, health insurance information. Verena throws an entire wallet on the counter. Take whatever you want, just let me in, he says, already out of patience. The nurse looks at the computer, types, prints the wristband, standard procedure. Calls someone on the internal phone. Minutes later, a doctor on duty, Dr. Renato, appears. His lab coat is slightly crumpled, his hair is starting to turn grey, and he has a tired expression, as if he's seen a lot. Miguel Antunes' mother, she asks. It's me. Verena steps forward. Lourdes almost gets up as well, reflexively, but she restrains herself. He had a seizure, according to the SAMU, Mobile Emergency Care Service team, explains the doctor. At the moment, he is stable, under observation and receiving oxygen. We will collect blood samples, perform a cranial CT scan to rule out more serious conditions, and perhaps request an evaluation by pediatric neurology. He is drowsy but responds to some stimuli. The situation is serious but for now under control. Words enter Verena like blades and bandages at the same time. Series. Controlled. Two things that shouldn't go together but do. I want to see him. Now, she pleads. You can come in, but only you, says the doctor. Verena looks back at Lourdes. For a second, she considers asking Lourdes to come in with her. But the nurse's gaze, already accustomed to emotional nannies, weighs heavily on the atmosphere. I'll tell you everything, okay? Verena says to Lourdes. Stay here a little while. She disappears through the door, following the doctor. Lourdes stays, alone, in an expensive hospital, in a hard chair with empty hands. She looks around. On the TV in the waiting room, a news report is once again talking about corruption in public healthcare, hospital queues, and a lack of beds in public hospitals. She sees all of this and thinks about the irony. There, where money buys almost everything, a baby had to fight against something that perhaps could have been seen before. Perhaps. 15 minutes later, Verena returns. Red eyes, but a more rational body. She sits next to Lourdes. For a few seconds, neither of them speaks. Then Verena takes a deep breath. My son's nanny saved his life today, she blurts out of the blue. Lourdes looks at her, surprised. If you hadn't insisted, if you hadn't yelled, if you hadn't said it wasn't normal, I would have believed the doctor, I would have waited. And, her voice falters, and maybe he wouldn't have arrived here breathing. Lourdes feels the impact of the phrase, but she doesn't smile, she doesn't feel proud. She thinks only of one thing. Why did it have to get to this point for them to believe me? Verena continues. The doctor said that the condition could be neurological, yes. He thinks the seizure was focal, that it only affected one side of the body. He mentioned a complex partial seizure and possible structural damage. I don't even know what that means. Lourdes listens to the words as if listening to a foreign language, but she understands the main point. Something in her head. He said, could it be something that was already there? Lourdes asks carefully. Verena bites her lip. She said so, she replies. She said that sometimes children are born with some kind of alteration, a tiny one, that only starts to show up later, either due to some oxygenation problem or malformation. She shakes her head. I don't know. I just know that I'm so angry at Dr. Elisa that I can't explain it. She runs her hands over her face as if she wants to tear off a mask. She came here this morning, looked at my son, saw these tremors, saw these strange little eyes, and told me they were benign myoclonus, that it was normal, that if I started ordering tests I'd be exaggerating. Her voice becomes more bitter. I almost believed her. In fact, I did believe her. I only called the ambulance because you yelled. Lourdes feels her back press further against the chair. The responsibility of having done the right thing, of having saved a life, weighs as heavily as it would have if she had made a mistake. I only saw what I saw, Mrs. Verena, she says humbly. I didn't know if it was all that serious. I just couldn't stay quiet. Verena looks at her in a way that's different from that boss-like look. It's as if for a moment the two of them were just two frightened women sitting in a hospital, hoping for the same baby. Well, I should have shouted yesterday, Verena said with a sad half-smile. The statement is not an accusation. It is an acknowledgement of how much the system makes people like Lourdes doubt their own voice. Lourdes lowers her eyes. I wanted to, but you trust the doctor so much. And I don't know how to speak eloquently, she confesses. Silence returns. Then Verena's cell phone vibrates. She looks at the screen. Gustavo. He meets. Hey. His voice on the other end is cold but rapid. I'm arriving at the hospital. What happened after all? Carlos from SAMU, Emergency Medical Service, texted me in the middle of a meeting saying, child having a seizure, serious condition. You freaked out because of a fever, and now my son is in the hospital with a possible neurological problem. What happened? Verena closes her eyes for a second. Gustavo, he had a seizure. Really? The nanny saw it first. If it weren't for her, maybe... She doesn't finish the sentence. On the other end of the line, Gustavo takes a deep breath, as if holding back a curse word. Where are you in there? In the pediatrics ward, near the red room. Stay here. We'll talk in person, he says and hangs up. Verena puts her cell phone away and stares at the floor. He's not going to take this well, she remarks, half to herself, half to Lourdes. Except what? Lourdes asks without malice. Verena takes a while to reply. When she responds, it's not just about the moment, it's about something bigger, something more hidden. Accepting that maybe our son was born with a problem, that he's not perfect like he wanted, that something got out of control, and she looks at Lourdes, accepting that it was the illiterate nanny who noticed before everyone else. Lourdes feels the phrase hit her hard. Illiterate nanny. She'd heard those two words many times, each separately. But together like that, coming from her boss's mouth in that tone, it hurts. Verena notices. I'm sorry, she corrects herself quickly. It wasn't supposed to sound like that. It's just, that's what they're going to think. The doctors, my husband, my family. They're going to think, how can a woman who can't even read think she understands more than a pediatrician trained in Europe? She makes air quotation marks with her fingers. Lourdes swallows the most honest answer she has stuck in her throat. Because I look at your son, not his resume. But she doesn't say. She simply replies, the important thing is that he's being taken care of now, right? Verena nodded without conviction. Minutes later, Gustavo enters the pediatrics area. Expensive suit, tie hastily loosened, face of someone who doesn't like having their routine interrupted. He looks around as if assessing a company in crisis. So, he asks without sitting down, with the energy of someone who wants to get straight to the point. Verena gets up. He's in there, under observation. He had a seizure, she repeats, exhausted. Gustavo glances quickly at Lourdes as if she were part of the furniture. He makes a minimal, almost imperceptible nod. Who diagnosed this? He asks. The on-call doctor? Have they called his pediatrician? The neurologist? The pediatrician didn't see us right away, Verena replies. The on-call doctor is ordering a CT scan, a neurology report. Gustavo, it's not time for... He interrupts her. Isn't this the time for what? For wanting answers? Our son is in there, all hooked up to wires, wearing a mask, and nobody tells me what's wrong with him. I have a right to know. His voice rises, drawing the attention of those nearby. A nurse glances sideways, accustomed to wealthy parents who think the hospital is an extension of their office. Gustavo continues. And another thing, yesterday the pediatrician came here and said everything was fine. Today the boy is having a seizure. Either this doctor is incompetent or something is very wrong, he says, with the calculated coldness of someone accustomed to pointing fingers in meetings. Lourdes feels her chest beating faster. Verena closes her eyes for a second. It turns out that... She takes a deep breath. It turns out that yesterday Lourdes had already said that something was strange, that the way he was breathing, looking, the tremors, weren't normal. And the doctor downplayed it, said it was just a fever. This morning again, Lourdes insisted. The doctor again said it was normal, that the exam was an exaggeration. If Lourdes hadn't screamed, we wouldn't have called the ambulance in time. Gustavo turns his gaze to Lourdes for real now. It is a gaze that weighs, that measures, that evaluates. Did you say that? He asks curtly. Lourdes holds her gaze. I only said what I saw, yes, sir, he replied. I saw his breathing was different. His hand was turning purple. His eyes weren't following each other. It didn't seem like just a slight fever. Then when he froze and started trembling on one side, I screamed. A tense silence settles in. Gustavo processes the information. He's not stupid, quite the opposite. He's extremely intelligent, and that's precisely why he hates it when someone outside the technical bubble gets something right that he didn't see. So, you mean to say that, he says slowly, an uneducated nanny noticed what a renowned pediatrician didn't? The phrase comes with venom. Verena intervenes quickly. That's not how it worked, Gustavo. Elisa assessed the situation based on what she had at the time. She didn't see the crisis unfolding. Lourdes did, because she was with him the whole time. Gustavo raises his hand, cutting off the pediatrician's defense. I'm not defending anyone, he says. I'm just saying that if this leads to something serious, someone will have to be held responsible. He looks at Lourdes again. And it won't be you, don't worry, on the contrary. Lourdes is strange. What do you mean? She asks. He gives a half smile, one of those that doesn't reach his eyes. What do you mean if it's proven that the pediatrician neglected clear signs, we'll sue, and everyone will know that a nanny noticed it first? That reflects very badly on her, on the hospital where she works, on the clinic, on everyone. Verena stares at him, annoyed. Gustavo, this is about our son, not about the legal process, she retorted. We'll think about that later. He sighs. For me, everything is about our son, she replies, including making sure no one else makes the same mistake. And yes, that includes holding whoever is responsible. You know how I am. Lourdes looks at one, then looks at the other. She feels she's entering a different kind of game now. A game for big players, for people with money, power, lawyers. And suddenly, something very unsettling crosses her mind. If they go after the doctor forcefully, they'll use my name. They'll use what I saw. And in front of a judge, a prosecutor, a lawyer, what will I be? The illiterate nanny who thinks she knows more than a doctor. Her heart is racing for a different reason now. She never thought she would have to prove what she saw. She just saw it. And then comes the final blow of part 2. A short time later, Dr. Renato returns to the waiting room. Miguel's mother. Father, she calls. Verena and Gustavo get up at the same time. Lourdes tries to stay seated, but her body won't obey. She stands up too, a step behind. We've finished the initial assessment, the doctor begins. He's stable on oxygen support and being monitored. We've already drawn blood, and he'll be sent for a head CT scan shortly. Pediatric neurology has already been notified. Verena asks, her voice faltering. Doctor, will he have lasting effects? It's a question that burns the throat. The doctor takes a deep breath. At this moment, it's impossible to answer, he says honestly. It depends on what the CT scan shows. If there was any damage, if it was an isolated episode, if... We'll only have clearer answers with the tests. Gustavo chimes in with another question, a practical one. In terms of time, if this had been detected yesterday or even earlier, would it have changed anything? Dr. Renato stares at him. It's a difficult question to answer without triggering blame in everyone. Look, in many neurological conditions in children, the earlier the intervention, the better, he says. But from what we know so far, This type of crisis can happen suddenly, even in children who seemed fine. It's multifactorial. I can't say that if someone had ordered an exam yesterday, things would be different today, but he glances quickly at Lourdes, as if sensing something. It's always best to take any change in a baby's behavior seriously. Always. Lourdes feels her legs go weak. Verena squeezes her hand sideways quickly, as if thanking her without words. Gustavo, however, fixes his gaze on the doctor. You said any change, even if it seems small? He insists. Yes, Renato replies, especially if the person who is with the child every day all the time says that something is wrong. That person usually has a sensitivity that we as doctors cannot ignore. That's when Gustavo says firmly, because that's exactly what his pediatrician did. She ignored the sensitivity of the person who's with him all the time, he says, pointing slightly with his chin at Lourdes. Did she see those signs? Was she informed? Verena replies in a whisper. Yes, twice. The doctor makes a face, showing professional discomfort. He doesn't want to go to war with his colleague, but he also can't deny the obvious. Lourdes, surrounded by those giants, feels something strange at the same time. Validation and fear. Validation because finally, someone in a white coat, inside a hospital, just said that her voice did matter. Fear, because this could turn into a battle she never chose to fight. She closes her eyes for a second, and it reminds me of something. Oh, envelope. That envelope in her bag, with Verena's handwriting, was still sealed. She looks at her boss. Mrs. Verena, she begins hesitantly. That envelope you sent me, I still haven't been able to read it. It's at your house. I was going to ask someone to help me read it today. Verena stares at her, confused for a second, as if she had completely forgotten about the envelope. Then a flash of light passes before her eyes. She remembers what she wrote, and her face changes. He turns pale, guilty, scared. Lourdes, she whispers, feeling the weight of a secret that has not yet been revealed. That envelope. If Miguel couldn't handle it today, I would never forgive myself for what I would have done to you. And that's when you, seeing this story, realize not everything at stake here is just the baby's health. He has money, he has power, he's guilty, and there's a decision that Verena had already made, in writing, about Lourdes' future, without Lourdes knowing. In the next part you will discover what was inside that envelope. How will the doctors react when Lourdes tells them all the details of what she saw? And how far is a wealthy family willing to go to protect its own image, even if it means distorting the truth about a nanny? If you want to hear part 3, subscribe to Stories of Millions, turn on notifications, and leave a like. That way, this story reaches more people and you won't miss when I release the continuation. You're still here. After a seizure, an ambulance, a hospital visit, and a secret in an envelope. If you've made it to part 3, it's because this story affected you in some way. So do one thing now so you don't forget later. Subscribe to the $1 Million Stories channel, like this video so it reaches more people, and comment, if the nanny hadn't insisted, no one would have believed her. I want to see who truly understands the weight of this story. Now, take a deep breath. Because today it's not just Miguel's health that's at stake. This is Lourdes' future. The hallway at São Gabriel Hospital smells of disinfectant and the air conditioning is too cold. People rushing past, stretchers going back and forth, children coughing in the waiting room, parents with sunken eyes from a sleepless night. In the midst of this organized chaos, Verena's phrase continues to echo in Lourdes' head. If Miguel couldn't handle it today, I would never forgive myself for what I would have done to you. What was she going to do? She was the one who always called Lourdes Miguel's guardian angel. She, who just minutes before had said in front of everyone, "My son's nanny saved his life today." Lourdes feels a shiver down the back of her neck. "What were you going to do to me?" she asks slowly, like someone stepping on ground that could collapse at any moment. Verena swallows hard. She looks from side to side, as if checking if anyone is listening. Gustavo is on his cell phone a few steps away, speaking quietly with someone from the legal team. The doctor has already returned to the internal area. The nurse is at the reception desk. It's as if for a few seconds only the two of them existed there. This isn't the best time for that, Verena begins. But Lourdes doesn't accept it. Not today. Not after all this. The best time was before you wrote, she replies, surprising even herself with the firmness of her voice. Now, I need to know. Verena closes her eyes for a moment. She vividly remembers the previous night, sitting at the kitchen counter, laptop open, half-empty glass of wine, a silence broken only by the sound of the baby monitor in the background. She remembers the feeling of being practical, rational, organized. Remember the folder with the title, House Cost Restructuring, and remember the word file, Lourdes Termination, text for a final conversation. She took a deep breath that night, picked up a blank sheet of paper, and began to write by hand. Not because she was romantic, but because she thought it was more human to deliver a letter. Now, there in the hallway, that piece of paper carries more weight than a medical report. I was going to fire you, she blurts out all at once, like ripping off a bandage. The words hit Lourdes like a slap that makes no sound, but burns. She blinks a few times, as if her brain needs a few seconds to process. Send it away. You were going to dismiss me, ma'am? She confirms, her voice low. Verena nodded, embarrassed. I was going to, he admits. Everything was ready. Text, account, calculation of the correct answer. Everything. I just didn't have the courage to speak yet. That's why I wrote it down. So I wouldn't stutter. Lourdes feels her stomach churn. She thinks about everything that job represents. The rent was paid on time, the eldest daughter's medication, the granddaughter's simple but private school, the gas, the electricity bill, the monthly grocery shopping. Think about the time too. 4 years in that house. 4 years waking up early to catch the first bus, arriving before the owners woke up, taking care of the routine, the breakfast, the diapers, the fever, the crying, the first tooth, the first step. 4 years. And an envelope. Why? She asks, her voice barely audible. Did I do something wrong? Verena takes a deep breath. She looks at the wall clock as if time could offer an excuse. But it can't. Financial, she replies directly. We've entered into a cost optimization plan, as Gustavo calls it, cutting everything that isn't strictly necessary. She ironically mimics her husband's words. Lourdes feels a strange mixture of anger and shame. Not strictly necessary. As if her work was superfluous. A luxury. Isn't your son's nanny necessary? She blurts out, unable to hold back, her voice almost failing. I spend more time with him than you do. More than his father. I saw him laugh, say, Mama. Even before you heard him. I took care of him when he was sick, with a fever at Christmas, at New Year's. Her emotion rises. I love this boy, as if he were family. It's not just a job for me, Mrs. Verena. The words fall heavily between the two of them. Verena lowers her head. I know, she admits, and that's why I couldn't talk. I kept putting it off. Month after month. Gustavo kept saying, Verena, just close this deal. It doesn't make sense to pay a nanny for 8 hours a day, plus benefits, plus social security contributions, when we can hire a cleaning lady 3 times a week and a part-time nanny just occasionally. She repeats her husband's corporate speech as if spitting out something she swallowed unintentionally. He even said, Verena continues, unable to look Lourdes in the eye, that if anything serious happened, there would always be a hospital, there would always be a doctor, that we don't need someone 100% of the time to keep fixing baby stuff. The phrase, to be constantly noticing baby stuff, hits like a knife. Lourdes remembers exactly what Gustavo said one day, half laughing. You're too observant, Lourdes. Soon you'll be finding things even where there aren't any. She found it. And it did. It took me a while to write that envelope, Verena says. It wasn't easy, I admire you, but I got caught up in Gustavo's game, in his Excel spreadsheet, in his cost-benefit logic, and you became just a number. She takes a deep breath. If Miguel, the voice falters, if he hadn't survived today, I would have looked at that envelope and thought, I took from his life precisely the person who truly knew him. Lourdes looks ahead, her gaze lost on some point on the wall. Her heart is in a very strange place. While it hurts to know she was almost discarded, she feels a confused relief, knowing that, at least for now, the envelope hasn't been read. And now? She asks, almost in a whisper. Verena understands. Now that Miguel almost died, are you still going to send me away? The answer cannot be a simple yes or no. Before she can say anything, Gustavo returns, putting his cell phone back in his pocket. I just spoke with the office, he announces. I've already asked them to gather all the messages, audio recordings, and patient records from that pediatrician. If there's any loophole, we'll go after it. He speaks like someone organizing a company merger, not dealing with his son's health. Verena tries to steer the conversation toward a serious topic. Gustavo, we also need to talk about something else, about Lourdes. He raises his hand, cutting. Later, he replies practically, Miguel is the priority right now. And, he looks at Lourdes, I already told you, you didn't do anything wrong. On the contrary. He takes a few steps towards the reception. I want my son's complete medical record, she announces, already positioning herself in front of the counter. Everything, from admission onwards. I know you don't usually give it out like this right away, but I have a right to access the information. The receptionist tries to explain the protocol, mentions deadlines, the responsible department, and the LGPD, Brazilian General Data Protection Law. Gustavo counters each point as if he's used to winning arguments. While he's stressing over paperwork, a soft voice calls from the inner door. Lourdes. She turns around, startled. It's Dr. Renato. Could you come here for a minute? He asks. Verena's eyes widen slightly. Doctor, she's not family. She's the nanny, he explains. He shrugs. I know, but that's precisely why I want to hear from her. She replies, she was with him the whole time, right? Verena nods, swallowing her pride, or rather, swallowing years of social hierarchy. Lourdes follows the doctor down a white corridor. They pass a colorful board with children's drawings, a door with a sign that reads, Pediatric Triage, until they enter a smaller room with a table, 2 chairs, and a glass whiteboard on the wall. He invites her to sit down. Lourdes sits on the edge of the chair without leaning back, as if it were disrespectful to take up the entire space. It's Donna Lourdes, right? He confirms. Just Lourdes, doctor, she corrects shyly. He smiles slightly. Lourdes, I'd like you to tell me, in your own words, when you started noticing something strange about Miguel. Don't worry about fancy terms. I need to understand it the way you saw it. She takes a deep breath. This is the time. The moment when her experience, so often ignored, can finally be worth something of real value. Not just emotionally, but on paper, in the report, in the medical decision. She begins, So, doctor, a few days ago, like 3 or 4 days, I noticed he was different. He was always cheerful, playful, making noise, calling out. But he started to get quieter. He stared into space. Before, when I shook his toy, he would follow it with his eyes. Then suddenly he started looking kind of askance. One eye would go, the other would linger. Renato picks up a pen and writes down keywords. Change in gaze, hypoactivity, started 3 to 4 days ago. Was there anything else? He asks. Yes, he did. His breathing, she continued. He seemed too tired to breathe, you know, even while sleeping. His chest would rise very quickly. A deep sigh every now and then. I've taken care of a lot of babies, doctor, a lot. I'd never seen anything like it. The doctor looks up. He realizes he's not listening to someone who just thinks. He's listening to someone who has an internal hard drive of years of practice. Did you tell your family? He asks. I spoke to him, she replies without hesitation. I spoke to Mrs. Verena. I even told the doorman one day when I was holding him downstairs that I thought he was acting strangely. I said I wasn't feeling right about that boy. And what about the tremors? Renato asks. Tell me all about them. Lourdes closes her eyes for a second, remembering as if it were a replay. It started with little tremors, like in his arm, you know? Like when you get a fright and your body jumps. I saw him doing it a few times. I called Mrs. Verena and said, look, I don't like this. She called the doctor. The doctor came, looked, and said it was something that comes with age, that it was benign myoclonus, something like that. That it was normal. Renato scores again. Myoclonus classified as benign by the private pediatrician. The doctor was here at my house again this morning, Lourdes continued. He started trembling again. His eyes looked a little lost. I said, Doctor, this isn't normal. She said I was too worried, that I should let his mother stay calm. She lowers her eyes, her voice growing hoarser. I almost shut my mouth completely, she confesses. Because, who am I? The doctor studied for years. He wears a lab coat, speaks eloquently. I only know how to look. Then, later, his left side completely seized up. That's when I screamed. Renato stops writing for a second. He looks at her with genuine respect. What you did today saved time, and in neurology, time is brain, he says bluntly. She blinks. Time is brain, he repeats. The sooner we act during a neurological crisis, the greater the chance of preventing permanent damage. If you had ignored it, just trusting in it's normal, it's a phase, the crisis could have lasted longer. He could have stopped breathing for longer. Then, yes, the risk of lasting damage would have increased significantly. Lourdes feels a wave of emotion rising within her. Time is brain. She doesn't know how to explain the term, but she understands the value of what she did. Renato continues. I'm going to record in the medical chart exactly what you just told me, she says. That the primary caregiver reported signs days ago, that she felt a difference, that she wasn't taken entirely seriously. That, to me, is important medical information. It's not gossip. Lourdes swallows hard. But, doctor, she ventures, this won't cause problems for me, will it? If his father decides to fight with the doctor, with the hospital, will they call me to a hearing, things like that? I don't even know how to sign my name properly, she admits, embarrassed. I'm afraid to speak, and then everything will turn out the wrong way. Renato thinks for a moment. He knows that what she fears is real. The system is cruel to those without formal education. Lourdes, I'll be very honest with you, he says. Your name might come up, yes, because you're an eyewitness to the situation. But from a medical point of view, what you did was right. It's care. It's protection. If one day someone tries to portray you as a problem, as the overprotective nanny, remember that for me, for the team here, you were the person who most helped Miguel arrive alive at this hospital. She feels her eyes welling up with tears. So you believe me? He asks. I believe so much that I'm going to write, he replies, showing the paper. He writes in clear handwriting. Caregiver Lourdes Nanny reports noticing behavioral and respiratory changes for 3 to 4 days, describing focal tremors, altered gaze, and progressive worsening. This report is consistent with a neurological condition. It is suggested that these observations be given weight, considering the daily and prolonged contact with the patient. She doesn't understand everything, but she sees her own name there, next to consistent report. It's as if, for the first time in their lives, the world is saying, you saw it right. He keeps the sheet. Okay, let's do this, he says. Go back to the waiting room. Stay close to your mother and father. The CT scan results should be ready soon. The neurologist will come to talk to them. If they ask, you can tell them again in your own way. Don't try to sound fancy. Tell the truth. She nods. Go back to the hallway. When he appears, Verena gets up immediately. So, did he say anything? She asks anxiously. He just had wanted to hear what I saw, Lourdes replied. He said it's important. That time is brain. She tries to repeat it carefully, as if the words were fragile. Gustavo, who had been listening from afar, approaches. Time is brain? He repeats. That's a stroke protocol phrase, isn't it? He's used to reading reports and watching doctors give lectures at company health events. He's not completely ignorant. It's useful for many neurological issues in children as well, says Renato, approaching again, now with another doctor by his side. This is Dr. Marina, a pediatric neurologist. She's already seen Miguel. The neurologist is young, her hair pulled back in a quick bun, dark circles under her eyes, but a firm and direct gaze. Good afternoon, she greets. I saw Miguel a little while ago. He's sleepy, but responsive to painful stimuli, meaning he reacts when we gently pinch his skin. He maintains spontaneous movements, mostly on his right side. On his left side, he's somewhat weak. Verena feels a chill. Weakness. Like what? He asks. He moves his left side less, Marina explains. This could be a temporary consequence of a focal seizure involving that hemisphere of the brain. Sometimes after the seizure, there's a transient paralysis, which we call Todd's paralysis. In many cases, it resolves within hours or days, but we'll only know for sure with imaging tests. Gustavo joins the conversation. Have the CT scan results come back yet? It's in progress, Marina says. I wanted to see the patient before looking at the screen. Now I'm going to check the exam. Before leaving, she glances quickly at Lourdes. Are you Lourdes? He asks. Yes, I am, doctor, she replies, already finding it strange that her own name is being passed around so much among doctors. Dr. Renato told me about your experience, Marina says. Thank you for insisting. A lot in pediatric neurology depends on people like you, who see the day-to-day reality and don't consider subtle changes fussy. That makes a difference. And he walks out into the hallway. Lourdes feels a mixture of pride and fear again. Verena, on the other hand, is in a different whirlwind. She looks at the floor, then at her husband, then at Lourdes, and he makes a decision right there, without a spreadsheet, without Excel, without anyone's approval. We're not going to send you away anymore, she blurts out suddenly. Gustavo turns his face away immediately. What? He asks, surprised. Verena meets his gaze. You heard, she says. I was going to fire Lourdes. It's right here in what I wrote. She taps her bag lightly, remembering the envelope. But today, if there's one thing that's become clear to me, it's this. It's not a luxury to have someone who truly looks after our son. Luxury is thinking we can handle everything alone just with money, and that almost cost him his life. Gustavo trava a dientes. Verena, we've already talked about costs, he retorted. It's not a matter of liking her or not. It's about numbers. Who do you want me to fire then? The security guard, the cook, the cleaning lady? Someone's going to have to leave, you know that. He says, someone, as if he were talking about a chair, not a person. Lourdes feels her chest tighten with shame and anger. She hates being the subject of a conversation like that, right in front of her, as if she were a company budget item. But Verena continues, if anyone has to leave, it won't be the one who saved my son's life, she replies firmly. Cut whatever you want, but not her. If you want, cut my personal trainer, cut my expensive salon, cut my imported boxed wine. I'll find a way. But Lourdes isn't leaving that house. Gustavo lets out a short, humorless laugh. You're saying that in the heat of the moment, he says. Tomorrow, when all this is over, you can go back to thinking rationally. She doesn't back down. I've never thought so rationally in my life, she exclaims. You talk about resource optimization. Well, the most valuable resource I have in this world is my son. And Lourdes is part of that. It's not an expense, it's protection. The entire hallway can almost hear the word protection. Lourdes lowers her eyes, choking. Gustavo faces his wife for a few seconds. He could keep arguing. He could throw the cost of Social Security, vacation pay, and the 13th month salary in their faces. He could do the math right there in the Notes app on his phone. But he's not stupid. He knows when he's at a moral disadvantage. He exhales. Okay, he says curtly. We'll revisit that later. It's not the main topic right now. He thinks for a second and adds, and yes, ma, looking at Lourdes, thank you, really. He heads out to the hospital cafe, probably to get some fresh air or to send more messages to his lawyer. Verena throws herself back into the chair. I've never spoken to him like that before, she admits, almost surprised by her own courage. You spoke beautifully, Lourdes comments with a shy half smile. I should have spoken nicely before to defend you, not just now that I'm afraid of losing my son, Verena retorted sincerely. The truth is, I also reduced you to a number. Only today did I understand that you saw what even I as a mother didn't want to see. Before the matter gets any deeper, Dr. Marina returns. You can see on her face that something important has come up. I already have the CT scan, she says. Can we talk? The three approach. Verena, Gustavo, who is rushing back from the cafe, and a step behind, Lourdes. Marina speaks, looking mainly at her parents, but without excluding Lourdes from her field of vision. The CT scan shows a different area on the right side of Miguel's brain, she begins. It's not acute bleeding, it's not an obvious tumor, but it looks like an old lesion, perhaps a scar, something that may have formed during gestation or childbirth. Verena feels the ground shake. You mean he was born like this? She asks, guilt in her voice. Did I do something? Did I gain too much weight, work too hard, stop taking some vitamin? Marina raises her hand calmly. Mom, please, she says. Guilt doesn't help at all here. Many of these injuries happen because of micro-events that nobody notices at the time. A momentary lack of oxygen, a small blood clot, a subclinical infection. It's not always someone's fault. Sometimes it's just the biological lottery. Lourdes pays attention to each syllable. Biological lottery. She thinks of her grandson who didn't survive. She wonders if, back then, she also had an old injury that no one noticed. Marina continues. This different area can explain the focal seizures, the strange gaze, the weakness on one side. The good news is, now that we know it exists, we can treat the seizures, monitor development, provide physiotherapy, and early stimulation. Many children with this type of alteration are able to have a life very close to normal with support. Verena holds Gustavo's hand, and he will, she swallows hard, he will be a normal child. The word normal carries weight. Marina chooses her answers carefully. He's going to be Miguel, she says, with his characteristics. He might have delays in some areas. He might have seizures controlled with medication. He might need occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy. But normal is a word that, honestly, doesn't help much. What I can say is you arrived quickly, the seizure was addressed, and that's a huge point in your favor. She takes a deep breath. And another thing, he adds, looking at Lourdes, if someone had valued what Lourdes saw 3 or 4 days ago, perhaps we would have arrived here before the first major crisis. That wouldn't change the fact that there's an injury, but it could have prevented today's scare. Her words are passed down as a sentence. Gustavo closes his eyes for a second. Verena felt guilt rising like a tidal wave. It's not just the doctor's fault. It's not just the system's fault. It's also her fault for choosing to believe in the comfort of "it's normal" rather than in Lourdes' concern. The neurologist concludes, now the plan is, we're going to admit Miguel to the pediatric ICU for safety, start anticonvulsant medication, and monitor him. You're going to have a long journey of neurological follow-up, but you're not alone, and she looks at Lourdes. If you want medical advice, listen to Lourdes, always. She leaves, leaving the three of them in the hallway. Silence. Then Gustavo, in a much lower voice than before, says, listen to Lourdes. She repeats, look where we've ended up. Verena looks at the nanny. She begins, her voice breaking. I don't know if I'll ever be able to repay what you did for him today. Lourdes simply replies, there's nothing to pay, Mrs. Verena. This boy, he's like my own. I only did what I had to do. She thinks for a moment, then continues bravely. Just don't send me away, please, she pleads, with a sharp humility. I'm not saying this because of today. I'm saying this because I feel I still have something to do in this boy's life. And in yours too. And in mine, you know. Verena feels the tears welling up again. I'm not going, she states. I was going to, but I'm not anymore. What I wrote on that envelope died today. She picks up her cell phone and sends a message to Rafaela. Rafa, throw away the white envelope with my name on it that's in Lourdes' bag on top of the cupboard. Don't let anyone read it, I'll explain later. Lourdes watches her, curious. Was it written that badly? She asks, trying to break the tension, letting a hint of humor slip out for the first time. Verena gives a tearful laugh. It was written that, she takes a deep breath, that starting next month you would no longer be part of our family. She corrects it immediately, from our home. But, let's be honest, you're more a part of the family than many relatives. Lourdes lowers her head, ashamed, but she can't hide the small smile that appears. She doesn't need any documents for that, but it helps to listen. And this is where the part of the story that few people show comes in. After the ambulance, the doctor, the CT scan, there's still the real world, hospital, to pay for. A lawsuit that Gustavo is dying to file against the pediatrician. The relationship with this doctor who will call, will send audio messages, will try to justify herself. Gustavo and Verena's family, who will give their opinion without having seen anything. And what about Lourdes' position in the middle of all this chaos? Because on the one hand, now everyone says the nanny saved Miguel's life. On the other hand, it is also true that her testimony could decide the future of a famous doctor's career, and that is a lot of weight for someone who only knows how to look. Days later, with Miguel already stabilized in the pediatric ICU taking medication, slowly opening his eyes, reacting to his mother's voice and Lourdes's hand. Verena's phone rings. It's Dr. Elisa, to a pediatrician. Verena. Her voice comes through the speakerphone, full of static. I heard you admitted Miguel to San Gabriel. I was very worried. What happened, after all? You mentioned a seizure in the message, but I was in surgery and... Verena takes a deep breath. She looks at Lourdes, who is sitting in a small chair next to the bed, gently touching the baby's little foot and speaking softly to him. Look at Gustavo, who's in the corner of the room on his laptop, reviewing a document titled Draft Civil Liability Lawsuit versus Dr. Elisa F. She replies, it turns out that everything Lourdes told you, everything you said was normal, wasn't normal. Her voice came out colder than she expected. It turned out that my son had a focal seizure, went to the ICU, and the doctors here found an old lesion in his brain. And it turned out that the one who saved his life wasn't you. It was the nanny you undermined. Silence on the other end. You can imagine the pediatrician's expression on the other end of the line. She tries to defend herself. Verena, look, I understand you're nervous, but I examined Miguel with the information I had at the time. Fine tremors with fever can indeed be benign myoclonus. The literature says so. Verena cuts. Literature says one thing, but Lourdes's gaze said something else, he retorted. And you chose to ignore her gaze. Elisa sighs. We can't order a CT scan for every baby who shows signs of tremors, she argues. You know that. Exposing the child to radiation, the cost of the exam, the waiting time. If I were to open up exam results for every subjective report from a caregiver, I'd be called an exaggerator. Sometimes we have to filter them. Ready, she spoke. Subjective account from a caregiver. That's when, for the first time, Verena realizes she's not on the doctor's side. She's on the side of the person who has always been there for her son. So the next time you hear a subjective caregiver account, Verena says with lethal calm, try to remember that this caregiver spends more hours with the child than any doctor, and that if you had ordered an exaggerated test yesterday, perhaps today my son wouldn't have a brain scar that I only discovered under the blaring of ambulance sirens. Silence. Elisa tries to argue further, talking about statistics, standard conduct, empiricism, and guidelines. But something has changed. It's not just a demanding father versus a doctor. It's an entire system being called into question by a simple phrase, I saw it, and it wasn't normal. Gustavo, listening to everything, sends a quick message to the lawyer. She admitted that she considered the nanny's account subjective and insufficient for examination. Do we have that? He records the call. Yes, the game is going to get dirty. But amidst this chessboard of power, legal processes, resumes, and reputation, one thing no one can deny anymore. The illiterate nanny was right. And that's why, in the next part, you'll see, how will Lourdes be treated when the matter becomes a legal process and no longer an emotion? How far is Gustavo willing to go to destroy the pediatrician's image? And then comes the moment when someone tries to convince Lourdes to soften the story, in exchange for a favor that could change her financial life. If you want part 4 of this story, now, subscribe to the $1 Million Stories channel, leave a like on this video. And she comments, the voice of the caregiver matters. Next, the matter leaves the hospital and goes to court, to the media, and to Lourdes' heart, where she will have to choose between the truth and her safety. If you're on part 4, you already know. This is not just a babysitter's story. It's about power. Who's in charge? Who is being listened to and who is used? So before continuing, perform the ritual. Subscribe to the $1 Million Stories channel. Leave a like so this video reaches more people. And he comments, those who see, know. Because now, Lourdes' truth is going to be put on display. And that's not always a good thing. 2 days after the seizure, Miguel is in the pediatric ICU, but much better. She opens her eyes as soon as she hears her mother's voice. He moved his left hand slightly. She cried softly when they pricked her arm for the medication. For those who saw him frozen with half his body unresponsive, this is almost a miracle. But while his little body struggles to reorganize itself, another war has begun outside. In the small ICU room, which barely fits a sofa bed and an armchair, Gustavo transformed the space into a mini office. Open laptop, spreadsheet on screen, files with names like Award Michael UTI, TFT MIT course, Guideline Pediatrics, Afebrile Seizure, Minuta, Ação, Lisp, Civil, Dryalisa, V3, DocX. And on the makeshift table, a coffee cup, headphones, a charger, a pen with a bank logo. Lourdes, sitting beside the crib, just watches. Miguel is breathing with the help of a small oxygen catheter. She gently runs her hand over his head. "You're feeling better, aren't you, my prince?" she whispers. "Grandma Lourdes is here. I'm not going out." Yes, Grandma Lourdes. She doesn't even realize when she confuses the word babysitter with grandma. You know, natural. On the other side of the room, Gustavo is on a call with his lawyer, Marcelo. "I want full accountability," he says, quietly but firmly. "If Dr. Elisa had valued the nanny's account, we could have done the examination sooner, controlled the seizures, and avoided all this trauma." Lourdes pretends not to hear, but every word hits her. The nanny's account. Valued. Full accountability. Marcelo says something on the other end, and Gustavo replies, "I have proof, WhatsApp messages, audio recordings, consultation history, medical records, and most importantly, a witness." He looks directly at Lourdes. To Lourdes. She feels a shiver down her spine. Witness. She, who knew the most witnesses she knew were from church weddings, is now going to testify in a fight between grown-ups. 2. The lawyer who speaks eloquently and dangerously late afternoon. Verena went home to take a quick shower and get clean clothes. The caregiver shift is divided between her, Gustavo, and, whenever possible, Lourdes. That day, Gustavo calls. "Lourdes, can I talk to you for a minute?" She stands up, adjusts her blouse, and runs her hand through her tied-up hair. He follows him to the ICU waiting room, where there are some blue chairs, a coffee machine, and a television on mute. There stands a man in a dark suit, a leather briefcase on his lap. Gustavo presents. "This is Dr. Marcelo. He's a lawyer. He's handling Miguel's case." Marcelo stands up, extends his hand with a professional, rehearsed smile. "Nice to meet you, Lourdes. I've heard a lot about you these past few days." She shakes her hand, unsure where to look. "The pleasure is all mine, doctor," she replies softly. They sit down. Gustavo to the side, Marcelo facing him. Lourdes on the edge of the chair, as if afraid of sinking. Marcelo begins. "Lourdes, let me explain quickly, okay? We're considering filing a lawsuit against Miguel's pediatrician, Dr. Elisa. The goal is to have it recognized that there was malpractice. It's not just about money, it's also to prevent this from happening to other children." He speaks in a calm, almost didactic tone. Lourdes nods slowly. "You want justice, right?" he asks. She thinks about the word justice. Think of the grandson who died without access to an ICU. Imagine the overcrowded public hospital, the doctor who didn't even properly look at the boy. Think about the feeling of helplessness you had before. "Yes, doctor," she replies, "but real justice, you know. No lies." Marcelo smiles. "That's exactly it," he says. "But justice, on paper, needs proof. And that's where you come in." She swallows hard. "Me?" he repeats. "You're the person who's seen Miguel the most in the last few days," he explains. "You saw the first signs. You insisted. You called the pediatrician. You heard her response. That carries enormous weight." Gustavo enters. "What Lourdes says could make the difference between Dr. Elisa being convicted or not," he says bluntly. Marcelo adds, "We need you to tell us, in writing and then in court, exactly what happened. What you saw, what you said, what she said. In your own words, without worrying about difficult words. That's one thing." He pauses. "And there's another thing," he says, carefully choosing his words. "Depending on how you report it, the process could have a much stronger outcome. And in that case, there's the possibility of compensation for you as well." This phrase appears to her as if it were in bold. "Compensation for you too." "Compensation? What do you mean?" she asks bluntly. Gustavo looks at Marcelo as if to say, "Go ahead." Marcelo explains, "When we file a lawsuit, we can claim not only moral and material damages for the parents, but also for anyone directly affected by the negligence. In your case, Lourdes, You were responsible for providing assistance, you went through trauma, and you were disregarded by the doctor. There is indeed grounds to claim compensation in your name. She doesn't fully understand the word compensation, but can you translate it into her home language? Money. Money. For me? She confirms, almost whispering. Yes, Marcelo replies, something that could help you a lot. Moving house, paying off debt, giving your granddaughter an education, that sort of thing. She feels her heart beating faster. It's as if someone suddenly opened a window that never existed before, but along with the light comes an icy wind. Marcelo continues, but for that to happen, it's essential that your account be very firm, without a doubt. No maybe, I think, or I don't remember exactly. We need it to be very clear that 1. You noticed something was wrong days before. 2. You notified the doctor. 3. She downplayed it, said it was normal, that you were exaggerating. 4. She refused to request a more thorough examination. Lourdes looks at the ground. Memory comes in waves. She remembers Elisa's face, tired but polite. Remember her saying, "This is quite common. There's no need to panic. Let's observe." She also remembers one detail. At no point did the doctor literally say, "I refuse to order the test." She said she didn't see the need at that moment. It's different. For a lawyer, it looks the same. Not for Lourdes' conscience. "Doctor," she begins slowly, "I remember the doctor saying it was normal, that I shouldn't be scared, that it could be something related to my age. I said my heart was heavy. She kind of didn't pay much attention. But she refused, like to say, I'm not going to order tests that I don't remember." Marcelo leans forward slightly. "Lourdes, let me explain something to you," he says in an almost professorial tone. "In law, we also work with interpretation. When a doctor faced with a clear report does not order an examination, he is in practice refusing to investigate. There's no need to use the phrase, 'I refuse.' The effect is the same." He looks into her eyes. If you say that she didn't see the need in practice, that's what it means. And she finishes, in a voice that's too soft. "The important thing is that you don't weaken your own truth with words that sound like excuses for it. Otherwise, Miguel is the one who loses, and you too. Ready?" He put them all in the same package. Miguel. Justice. And that little bit of money could change Lourdes' life. Gustavo makes his final argument. "Lourdes, I'm going to be very direct, okay?" He says, "I'm hiring an expensive lawyer for this case. I'm going to pursue everything. If the justice system recognizes that they wronged our son, I insist that you be compensated as well. But for that to happen, we have to be on the same side. No contradiction. On the same side. As if the existence of another side were a form of betrayal." Lourdes remains quiet. In her mind, a mental battle begins. On one side, the memory of the grandson, the lack of a doctor, the anger at the system. On the other hand, the memory of Elisa, the pediatrician who'd been treating Miguel since his first months, who always saw Verena even outside of regular hours, who once saw Lourdes' own granddaughter for free in a squeezed-in appointment when the girl had a high fever and Lourdes didn't have any money. Try. Nobody there knows that, but Lourdes remembers. She squeezes the hem of her blouse with her hand. "Doctor," she says in a whisper, Can I think about this for a bit? It's a very big deal. I'm afraid I might say something wrong and then God will hold me accountable." Marcelo forces a smile. "Of course, Lourdes," he replies, "but we need to move quickly because there are deadlines. So if you agree, I can take your formal statement tomorrow, just to have it on record while it's still fresh in your mind." He takes a card out of his wallet and hands it to her. Glossy card with elegant lettering. She holds it as if it was something too fragile. "Gustavo, date. Don't worry. The only thing you need to do is tell the truth," she says. She nods, but for the first time in that hospital, she's not entirely sure what truth they expect her to tell. 3. A conversation. No unplanned later at night, when the movement in the hallway thins out, Verena arrives with a bag of clothes, a pillow from home, and a small container of food. She took turns with her mother-in-law for a few hours, but then rushed back. Lourdes is in the same place, next to the crib, hand on Miguel's little foot. "How is he?" Verena asks, coming closer. "He's more awake today," Lourdes replied, her eyes filled with affection. He even cried a little out of laziness when they changed his diaper. That's a good sign. Verena smiles, relieved. Then he notices Lourdes' face, more serious, with a distant look. Did something happen? He asks. Lourdes hesitates for a second. Remember Gustavo's words, being on the same side. If she says the lawyer mentioned money, in a strong version, will it seem like she's against them? But she looks at Verena, and there, she's not the boss. She's a mother. Yes, it happened, Mrs. Verena, she finally said. The lawyer came to talk to me. He said my testimony is important. He talked about the lawsuit, compensation, even for me. And I'm afraid of getting lost in the middle of all this. Verena's eyes widen. Did he mention compensation to you? She asks, genuinely surprised. She did say that, Lourdes confirms. And she said I have to be very firm, without I think, without maybe, that the doctor kind of refused to order tests. But I don't remember that phrase exactly, and I don't want to exaggerate anything. The phrase hits Verena like a punch of reality. She knows her husband. He knows how far he's willing to go for a result. He sits in the armchair, thinks for a few seconds, and asks, Lourdes, do you really want to sue Dr. Elisa? Seriously? Lourdes lowers her head. I don't even know, she replies honestly. I'm angry because she didn't listen to me. I am. I suffered watching that boy convulse. I suffered. And nobody saw me. Now they see me because it's useful in the legal process. She takes a deep breath. But I also remember that one day she looked after my granddaughter without charging anything, that she treated me well when I went there afraid I had caught COVID, that she didn't look down on me because I'm a nanny. And I also know that doctors make mistakes, right? People make mistakes. Verena feels something she didn't expect. Admiration. She, with her college education, travel experience, and access, is more inclined to crush the doctor than Lourdes, who was disregarded. You're more fair than a lot of people I know, Verena blurted out, without a filter. Lourdes gives a shy little smile. I'm just afraid of... She searches for the words. Becoming someone else's weapon. One person tells me to say one thing, another tells me to say something else, and I'm stuck in the middle, not knowing if they're helping me or using me. Verena takes a deep breath. And now, she needs to choose whether to push Lourdes into the legal process or protect her, even from her own husband. Lourdes, let me tell you something from the heart. She says, my anger towards Dr. Elisa is immense. I feel she failed us. I do want her to be held accountable in some way, but I don't want that to go against your conscience. She continues, what you have to say is what you remember, exactly as it happened. If that helps the process, great. If it doesn't help as much as Gustavo wants, oh well. I'm not going to let anyone force you to exaggerate anything. Lourdes looks at her, moved. You won't get angry with me if I say something that gets in the way? She asks, quite directly. I'll be angry about the situation, Verena admits, but not at you. What you've already done for my son is greater than any lawsuit. Silence for a few seconds. Miguel stirs slightly in his crib. Lourdes breathes a sigh of relief. But the story is only getting more interesting. 4. When the doctor steps out of the paper and into the room 2 days later, at the end of a rainy morning, someone knocks on the bedroom door. Verena thinks she's a nurse. But when you look, it's her. Drag. Elisa. No lab coat. Casual clothes. Hair tied up in a makeshift bun. A bag slung over her shoulder. Her face is a mixture of tiredness, guilt, and fear. Can I come in for a minute? She asks from the doorway. Verena feels a tightening in her chest. Gustavo is not there. He went to sort something out at work. Lourdes is sitting in the armchair, with the Bible open in her lap and her glasses perched on her nose. Verena looks at Elisa, then at her son, then at Lourdes, and leave it at that. You can, she replies dryly. Elisa enters slowly, as if each step inside that room carried legal weight. She looks at Miguel. Her eyes instantly fill with tears. Oh my God, she whispers. He's on an IV, oxygen, he's so tiny. She approaches the side of the crib but doesn't touch it. Verena crosses her arms. Don't touch me, he says firmly. Elisa steps back a little. I understand if you're angry with me, she says. I'm angry with myself too. I came here today because I couldn't stand just reading Gustavo's messages talking about lawsuits, mistakes, and lawyers. I needed to look at you as a mother and look at him as a patient. She takes a deep breath. Verena, I know this doesn't change what happened, but I swear that on the day I examined Miguel with the information I had, I didn't see a typical picture of a severe seizure. I saw subtle tremors, no loss of consciousness, no gross changes on physical examination. The protocol, she tries to explain. Verena interrupts. I've already heard the protocol, she says coldly. What you haven't heard is what Lourdes has to say. She gestures towards the nanny. Elisa turns her gaze to Lourdes. It's the first time the two have faced each other since the altercation. Lourdes. The doctor's voice faltered. I owe you an apology. The nanny slowly closes the Bible. Excuse me, why, doctor? He asks without irony. Because I called your concern an exaggeration. Elisa admits, because I didn't appreciate the fact that you see this boy every day since he was born. I let my medical knowledge get the better of me, and the result is what we see. She points sadly towards the bed. Verena watches without speaking. Lourdes swallows hard. She wanted that recognition. I've wanted this forever. He just didn't imagine it would be like this. In the midst of a catheter, an IV pump, and a lawyer writing a petition. Elisa continues, I didn't come here to talk about the process, about the defense, she says. I'll deal with that with my lawyers. I came here to ask that, if you are called to give your testimony, you tell what really happened. Not to save me, not to destroy me, just the truth. This sentence falls into the middle of the room, as if someone had opened a window. Verena looks at the doctor in surprise. Gustavo would never ask for that. He would ask, say what benefits us. Elisa is asking, tell the truth even if it hurts. Lourdes, who felt like she was walking a tightrope, suddenly sees a foot on each side, a lawyer saying, stand firm on our side. A doctor saying, don't pull my leg, just don't make things up. She is breathing. Doctor, she begins, I was very angry with you. I still am a little, really, because I saw that something was wrong and you cut me off. It seemed like I was just the overly concerned nanny. Elisa's eyes well up even more. You have every right to be angry, she admits. But I also don't think it's fair to say that you didn't care about Miguel. Lourdes continues. I've seen mothers who don't even take their children for vaccinations. You always answered. You always gave advice. You even took care of my granddaughter without charging. I haven't forgotten. Verena's eyes widen. She didn't know that. I was wrong, Elisa says with heavy honesty. But it wasn't through negligence. It was through trusting statistics too much and trusting the eye of the person in charge too little. Silence. Finally, the doctor concludes. What I wanted to ask you, Lourdes, isn't forgiveness. That's between you and God, she says, looking deep into the nanny's eyes. What I'm asking you is don't let anyone put words in your mouth. Not in my favor, not against me. You saw, you know, you speak. She turns to Verena. And as for you, Verena, she says, her voice firm despite the trembling, if you want to and think you should, go ahead and file the lawsuit. I'll respond. But know that in the midst of all this, there's one thing we can still do together. Take care of Miguel's future. Verena narrows her eyes. What do you mean? He asks. He'll need neurological follow-up, stimulation, physical therapy, speech therapy. Elisa explains. I know good people. I can help you build a network. I can point you to people who really work with this type of injury. I don't want our separation as a doctor and a mother to interfere with his treatment. This part is tricky. Verena is proud, but she's not stupid. Miguel needs everything. She takes a deep breath, holds back the urge to say, I don't need you for anything anymore, and replies, I'll think about it, she says. Right now I'm too hurt to separate things. Elisa understands. Okay, he replies. You have that right. She looks at Miguel one last time. Hang in there, little one, she whispers, her voice barely audible. And you know. When the door closes, there is such a profound silence that you can hear the beeping of the machine, the air entering through the catheter, the distant sound of a medication cart passing in the hallway. Verena looks at Lourdes. And now? He asks. Lourdes closes her eyes for a second. Now, I'm going to do what I've always done. He replies, look at Miguel and tell him what I saw. Nothing more, nothing less. 5. When the truth starts to cost money, days go by. Miguel, you know from UTI, go pro forth. From his room, he starts listening to soft music and watching cartoons on the small TV screen. The doctors are testing stimuli. He squeezes Lourdes's finger. He moves his little foot. He makes sounds. Little by little, life tries to return. But out there, the world knows. A health columnist for a major news website publishes a note. High-income couple considers suing renowned pediatrician after alleged negligence in child seizure case. No names. But those in the inner circle already know who they're talking about. Gustavo likes it. That's putting pressure on me, he remarks. Elisa receives snide messages from colleagues. Some defend it, others distance themselves. Her reputation, built over years of on-call duty, is beginning to falter. And in the midst of all this, Lourdes's phone rings, late in the afternoon. Unknown number. Hello, she answers. Mrs. Lourdes, this is Patricia, assistant to Dr. Marcelo, Mr. Gustavo's lawyer, says a very polite female voice. The doctor would like to schedule the signing of your statement for tomorrow. He has already drafted it based on what Mr. Gustavo reported. You would only need to read and confirm it. To read. She feels her stomach churn. But I don't read very well, miss, he confesses. Only some simpler things. My eyesight isn't great either. No problem, the assistant replied, overly enthusiastic. The doctor will read it aloud to you and you just confirm, okay? It seems practical, but that's precisely where the risk lies. What if there's something I don't remember in that exact way? Lourdes ventures. The voice on the other end drops by a semitone. We'll adjust it, of course, she replies, but it's important that you maintain consistency with the line of the process so as not to jeopardize the thesis, right? Process timeline. Her truth now needs to fit on a single line. I'm saying what I saw, Lourdes emphasizes as if trying to remind herself. The rest at God beware. She takes a deep breath. I'll go tomorrow, she decides. Turn it off. Verena, who only heard the end, asks, was it the lawyers? It was, Lourdes replied. I'll go there tomorrow to talk and sign the papers. Verena thinks fast. She knows that if she lets them, Gustavo and Marcelo will orchestrate everything behind her back. I'll go too, she says. Not to interfere, but... Yeah, she adds with a half smile. Lourdes laughed, relieved. Better, she agrees. That way if I say something stupid, you can pull my ear. They don't realize it. But this trip to the office is going to be a turning point, because that's where Lourdes will discover in practice the true value of her truth. And it is there that someone will make a proposal that will shake everything she believes in. If you want part 5, where? Lourdes enters a fancy office for the first time in her life. She discovers that the written version of her story isn't really her story, and receives an offer that could solve their financial life, but it exacts a price on their conscience. Then, subscribe to the $1 Million Stories channel, leave a like on this video. And he comments here, my truth is not for sale. In the next part, the nanny will have to choose between 3 things that almost never go together: truth, loyalty, and money. If you've made it to part 5, you're no longer just here for the babysitter story. You're here because you recognized yourself at some point in Lourdes, Verena, Gustavo, or even Dr. Elisa. Before seeing the ending, do what you always do. Subscribe to the $1 Million Stories channel, leave a like so this series reaches more people. And he comments, a clear conscience is priceless, because now the truth about Lourdes is going to be put up for sale. And you'll see what she decides to buy with that money. The next day at 3 in the afternoon, Lourdes gets off the bus in a neighborhood she only knew by name. Glass building, entrance with a receptionist in a suit, expensive coffee on the corner, imported car parked with hazard lights flashing. She tightens her grip on the shoulder strap of her bag and looks up. One of those buildings that looks like it's scratching at the clouds. Next to her, Verena. Hair tied back, simple yet elegant clothes, serious face. It's here, Verena says. Lourdes nods nervously. Inside the hall, the floor gleamed, and the scent of expensive perfume mixed with coffee filled the air. The security guard asks, "Name and floor?" "Dr. Marcelo Farias's office." Verena replies, "We have an appointment." The man checks a screen. 14th floor, elevator on the right. Lourdes enters the elevator feeling out of place, as if her clothing spoke too loudly in a place where everyone wears expensive silence. When the door opens on the 14th floor, a hallway with soft carpet leads to a reception area with a metallic logo on the wall. MF Law and Consulting. Young woman in a blazer with a practiced smile. "Good afternoon, welcome. Is Mrs. Lourdes here?" she asks. Lourdes nods, adjusting her bag. "The doctor is already waiting," the receptionist says. "Please come in." The office is beautiful. Large table, dark wood, comfortable armchairs, bookcase full of thick books that nobody reads in their entirety. On the wall, framed certificates. At the center of it all, Marcelo, impeccable suit, expensive watch, calculated smile. "Lourdes," he stands up. "It's so good that you came. And Verena too, great." They greet each other. Lourdes doesn't know whether to sit or wait to be told what to do. Verena pulls out the chair next to hers. Marcelo begins the play. "First of all, I want to sincerely thank you for coming, Lourdes," he says calmly. "What you've been through these past few days, it's no small thing." She shakes her head, somewhat embarrassed. "I just want to do things right," he replies, without saying anything stupid. He opens a folder. Grab a sheet of paper with several pages. The title is up there. Testimonial Statement, Maria de Lourdes Santos. Her heart races when she sees the full name. Suddenly she stops being just Lourdes and becomes Maria de Lourdes Santos, person with documentation, a person who can be blamed, used, or listened to. 2. When the written version is not quite your own. Marcelo adjusts his glasses, which he doesn't really need, but they help with the pose. "Lourdes, I made a draft of what you told us, okay?" he says. "I'll read it aloud, and if there's anything you disagree with or think is different from what you remember, let me know. We'll adjust it." He begins. "I, Maria de Lourdes Santos, Brazilian child caregiver, declare for all due purposes that, as the nanny of the minor Miguel A., I have been accompanying the child's daily routine since he was 4 months old. On such and such a day, I observed episodes of unusual tremors of a clearly abnormal nature and immediately realized that something serious was happening. So far, so good. She really does remember the tremors. Clearly abnormal. She wouldn't say it like that, but she understands the intention. But then comes, in the following days, I repeatedly and insistently reported to the attending pediatrician, Dr. Elisa M., that the child was exhibiting behaviors consistent with seizures, absences, and neurological alterations, but the doctor downplayed my concerns, labeling them as exaggeration and hysteria, typical of a lay caregiver. Hysteria. That word sets off a red flag for her. "Doctor," she interrupts, raising her hand slightly. I never heard her say hysteria, no, that I remember perfectly. Marcelo smiles, still calm. "Of course, Lourdes," he replies. "The exact word may not have been hysteria, but that was the gist. She treated her concerns as an exaggeration, as something someone who doesn't understand would do. In law, we can use that kind of term to describe her attitude." Lourdes frowns. "But if I sign a paper saying I heard hysteria and I didn't, I'm lying, right?" she insists. Verena observes, silent but attentive. Marcelo adjusts his posture in the chair. "I understand your concern," he says. "So let's take the literal word hysteria and replace it with minimized my concerns, treating them as exaggerated. Is that all right?" she thinks. Yes, that did happen. She remembers the exact feeling of having been diminished. "That's fine," he agrees. He crosses one thing out, writes down another. Keep reading. "On at least 3 occasions before the serious seizure episode, I clearly requested that Dr. Elisa perform a neurological examination or further investigation, but the doctor refused, stating that there was no reason for tests and that I was just nervous." Lourdes feels her stomach churn. 3 occasions. "I requested a neurological exam. He refused." She mentally returns to the subject. It had audio. She had the appointment. He had a brief call with the secretary, in which she requested an appointment, but she didn't say neurological exam, Those were the words. She was saying, "Doctor, shouldn't he need an examination? Can't we look at his brain and see if everything's all right?" She doesn't know the names of the tests, and refused also raises doubts. The doctor explained that according to protocol, she saw no need for it. "Doctor," she interrupts again, "I don't like that part." He raises his eyes. "Which part specifically?" "At least 3 times. I don't remember if it was 3 like that." She says, "And I requested a neurological exam." "I didn't say it like that, with that fancy name. I said I thought I had to have an exam, but I don't know what it was." And refused. I didn't hear that from her either. She said she thought it wasn't necessary now. It's different, isn't it? Verena lets out a discreet sigh, pride mixed with concern. Marcelo leans back in his chair. Now the smile fades a little. "Lourdes, I understand that you want to be absolutely literal," he says in a slightly more serious tone, "but you need to understand that in a legal process, if you soften it too much, you run the risk of it seeming like there was no mistake at all, and that harms both the family and you." She clasps her hands in her lap. "But if I increase it too much, it will harm my soul," she replies simply and directly. 2 seconds of silence, the kind that weighs you down. Marcelo chooses a different tactic. "Let me ask you a different question," she says. "Did you leave the appointment feeling that the doctor had been careful or negligent?" "I left feeling like she hadn't listened to me properly," Lourdes replied. "That she should have looked deeper, that she should have ordered some tests, that she trusted too much in what she was used to seeing. So, objectively speaking, she failed to order tests that she could have ordered," Marcelo concludes. "In law, this is understood as a refusal to delve deeper into the investigation. We need to translate this feeling into legal language." He offers, "How about this? On more than one occasion, I expressed to the doctor my concern and the possibility of needing tests, but she said that she didn't see a need for further investigation at that moment, which in practice resulted in a lack of appropriate tests." Without the word refused, matching what you felt with what happened. Lourdes breathes. "Now that sounds honest. Don't invent phrases, but don't cover up the mistake with cotton candy either." "That way I can sign," she replies. Verena nods in agreement. "That way it's even more faithful," she emphasizes, "and it remains strong." Marcelo goes back to adjusting the text. Once, twice, 3 times Lourdes interrupts to correct details. The schedule was wrong. A phrase that was attributed to her, but in fact it was Verena who said it. A passage stating that she had never been heard by the doctor before this consultation, which was not true. "Doctor, that's not right," she corrects. "There were times when the doctor did listen to me. She even advised me on what to do about his reflux when he was little. I'm not going to say never. I don't like that word." Marcelo sighs discreetly. The process timeline is becoming less spectacular and more realistic. And that's where the most expensive part of the conversation comes in. 3. The proposal that had a number and a weight. After spending nearly an hour adjusting the text, Marcelo closes the folder and changes his tone. Lower, more confidential. "Lourdes, now I'm going to say something more directly to you," he warns. "Whatever you say here, I ask that it stays between the 3 of us." She looks at him. "Let's keep this between us until we get to the courthouse, okay, doctor?" she replies with a shy half smile. He chuckles. "Fair," he admits. And then, "Gustavo is filing a substantial compensation claim. Very substantial," she says. "Moral damages, material damages, possible future impact on Miguel's development. It's a serious lawsuit. We're also going to include you as a party, seeking compensation for the psychological and emotional damage you suffered, in addition to the devaluation of your testimony as a caregiver." She tries to keep up. "And what does that mean for me in practice?" he asks. Marcelo is pragmatic. "That means that if the judge finds Dr. Elisa responsible, there's a good chance you'll receive a considerable sum. I'm not talking about a small amount of money. I'm talking about something that could change your life." He says that as if he were casting bait into a calm lake. Verena watches attentively. "Like, how much, doctor?" Lourdes asks hesitantly. "I know there's no way to know for sure, but is it something like 1,000, 10,000? He rests his hands on the table. In scenarios I've seen, it can reach somewhere between 50,000 and 150,000 reais for each directly affected party, he explains. I'm not promising anything, but that's the order of magnitude. The word enters her like a thunderclap. 50,000, maybe 80, maybe 100. She does the calculation in silence. It would be possible to leave the rented shack and move into a better room, buy a decent bed for your granddaughter, pay for overdue blood pressure medication. Perhaps she could help her son get out of debt with the loan shark. That's a lot of money for someone who's always counted pennies for bus fare. She feels her heart racing, and along with it, a dark thought. If I agree a little more with what they want, will that increase my chances of winning this money? Marcelo continued, as if he could read the tension on her face. I don't want you to lie at any point, he says. What I'm asking is that you don't downplay what you've experienced. Your words have power. There are people who, during their testimony, start to downplay things. Oh, it wasn't that serious, I also exaggerated. That destroys the case. Lourdes remains silent for a few seconds. Verena observes quietly, respecting her internal process. Inside, it looks like this. On one hand, she imagines the granddaughter in her private school uniform, a full refrigerator, the relief of not having to choose between paying the electricity bill or buying medicine. On the other end, she hears her mother's voice from the countryside. Money obtained through lies doesn't last. And even if it does, it doesn't nourish the soul. That old simple voice that doesn't know what moral damage is, but knows what it's like to sleep with your head on the pillow. She takes a deep breath. Look at the paper, look at the pen, look at the lawyer, you decide. Doctor, she begins, I'm not going to downplay what I've been through. It was tough. I warned them, nobody listened properly, and look what happened. I'll talk about this anywhere. Marcelo nods, pleased. She continues, but I'm also not going to say anything I haven't heard, that I don't remember, that I'm not sure about inside. She points to her chest. If this reduces the money, it reduces it. God knows what I need. Silence. Verena smiles sideways. Marcelo doesn't smile, but he doesn't insist either. He understands there's a limit there, and limits are something that a smart lawyer learns to respect. 4. The day of the testimony. When everyone wanted a little bit of her truth a few weeks later, the day of the hearing arrives. Simple courtroom, table for the judge, chairs for lawyers, recorder on. In front, the judge. Next to him, the clerk. On one side, Marcelo representing Gustavo and Verena. On the other side, a lawyer from the health insurance company defending the doctor. Elisa is there too, dressed modestly, with tired eyes and a tense face. Lourdes enters the room with sweaty palms. He's never been to a place like this before. Legal, cold. The smell of paper, air conditioning, and nervousness. Maria de Lourdes Santos? The judge asks. Yes, sir, she replies. Madam, you will be sworn in to tell the truth, under penalty of criminal prosecution if you fail to do so, he explains formally. Do you understand? She looks the judge in the eyes. I understand, he replies. I'll tell you what I saw. Only what I saw. The judge orders you to sit down. The recorder is turned on. Marcelo begins asking questions, building the narrative. Mrs. Lourdes, could you explain exactly what your role was in Miguel's house? Could you tell us when you first noticed something strange about his movements? What exactly did you tell Dr. Elisa during the consultation? How did you feel when you heard her answer? Lourdes replies calmly, I told her I noticed he was trembling differently, that his eyes were kind of fixed sometimes. I said my heart was heavy, that I had already lost a grandson because of a doctor who didn't pay attention. She said it was normal for his age, that I was nervous, that there was no need to be scared. It doesn't increase, it doesn't cut, it doesn't decorate. Next, it's the opposing party's lawyer's turn. Mrs. Lourdes, do you have training in nursing, medicine, physiotherapy, or something similar? No, ma'am. So everything you know is from experience, is that correct? That's right. I've been taking care of children for many years. I learned through daily experience. Do you recall exactly if the doctor at any point forbade any tests from being performed? For example, using expressions like, I refuse to order tests, or I'm not going to investigate. Not those phrases, Lourdes replied firmly. What she said was that, based on what she was seeing at the time, she didn't think it was necessary. But I still thought something was wrong. The lawyer tries to exploit. Don't you think it's possible she exaggerated out of fear, given her difficult history with her grandson? Lourdes looks at her with respect, but firmness. I was afraid, but I didn't exaggerate, she says. If I had exaggerated, Miguel wouldn't be where he is today. The room falls silent for a moment. Even the judge looks up. This is not a quote from a book. It's a phrase from someone who has lived through it. Marcelo, who is by her side, knows. There he lost the drama of the explicit refusal, but gained something greater. It gained credibility. Finally, the judge asks, on his own initiative, Mrs. Lourdes, do you harbor any specific personal resentment against Dr. Elisa? She thinks. I could say yes, that I hold a grudge, but what he feels is more complex. I still feel sadness for what happened, he replies, and I think she should have listened to me more. But I also saw her help people who had nothing. She even treated my granddaughter without charging. Both things are inside me, doctor, the anger and the gratitude. I don't just have one feeling. Nobody expected that answer, not even the defense, not even the accusation, not even the judge himself. Hearing this, Elisa bursts into silent tears, not because she was forgiven. She didn't go, but because she was seen as human by someone who would have every reason to dehumanize her. 5. The outcome that nobody planned exactly like this. Months go by. Expert reports are compiled. Expert analyses conducted. Experts consulted. Miguel is undergoing treatment at this time. Physiotherapy, occupational therapy, phone. He plays less than other children, but smiles just as brightly. Lourdes remains with her family, strong and resilient. Now, officially, it's not just babysitting, it's part of history. One day, Gustavo arrives home with an envelope in his hand. Playing a serious face, but with a hint of relief. The verdict has been delivered, he announces. Verena puts down her cell phone. Lourdes, who was washing a baby bottle, dries her hand on the dish towel and approaches. So, doctor, she says, half jokingly, half tensely. Gustavo takes a deep breath. The judge acknowledged that there was misconduct on the part of Dr. Elisa, he says, not a gross error, like abandonment, but that she could and should have investigated better in light of the reports. He ordered her and the health plan to compensate us. Verena puts her hand to her mouth. Lourdes feels her heart racing. And us? Verena asks. How much? Gustavo looks at the paper. The amount was less than Marcelo wanted, he admits. But it's not a small amount. Part for us. And part for you, Lourdes. She blinks. For me? How much? She asks, almost voicelessly. He shows the paper. She doesn't quite understand the lines, but she hears them from him. 35,000 reais. The amount is less than the lawyer had suggested was a possibility, but for her reality it's still something huge. She leans back in her chair. 35, he repeats. Her brain races. It's enough to pay off all the debts. It's enough to help my son. It's enough to buy a bed, a refrigerator, maybe even put my name on a simple little house in the suburbs. Gustavo adds, I know it's not what you deserve, for what you did to my son, but it's what the justice system has written on paper. Lourdes remains silent for a few seconds, then look at Verena. Madam, do you think it's fair that I receive this? He asks. Verena replies without much thought. I think it's not enough, he says, but I also think that if anyone deserves to receive it, it's you. Gustavo, who previously only saw the nanny as a pawn in the process, now sees the woman who threw herself to the ground next to his son when the boy's body was convulsing. He speaks, half swallowing his pride. If it weren't for you, Miguel might not have even made it to the hospital alive, she admits. This money, it's the least I could do. Lourdes takes a deep breath. An old fear rises. What if this money is cursed because it came from a lawsuit, because it involved damaging other people's reputations? She remembers the testimony. Remember every question. Remember that at no point did she stray from her line of truth. And then she calms down. If I had lied, I wouldn't even want to touch that money, she thinks. He says aloud, I'll accept, he says calmly, but I'll set aside some to do things right too. Verena asks, what? She replies simply, helping another child who needs a doctor and doesn't have one. Even if it's just with an exam, medicine, I don't know. I know what it's like to lose a grandchild because nobody looked properly. I don't want that for anyone else. Nobody expected this. Not even Gustavo. Not even Verena. But that makes sense. Lourdes had never seen a large sum of money in her hand. When you see it, your first reaction isn't to buy, it's to share. Not because she is a saint, but because he knows, firsthand, the value of a chance. 6. What happened to each of them? Finally, you deserve to know where each piece of this story ended up. Miguel is growing up. He has some motor delays and needs monitoring, but he also has a smile that fills the room, a stubbornness reminiscent of his father, a sensitivity reminiscent of her mother. Go to school with support, go to therapy and make corny jokes. And one day when he's a little older, he asks Lourdes, "Grandma, were you with me when I was sick in the hospital?" She replies, "Yes, I was, my love, and I'll always be there whenever you need me." He accepts. For him, it's that simple. Verena can never look at doctors the same way again. But she also learns something she didn't know. There is protocol, but there is also instinct. She becomes that kind of mother who ask a question, read the report, ask for a second opinion, and listen to everyone. Doctor, nanny, teacher, physiotherapist. Between her and Dr. Elisa, the relationship ends up being a clinical one, but not as a story. Years later, at a children's health conference, Verena is invited to speak about her experience as a mother. She tells everything, including the nanny who saw it before the doctor. And he nails it. Those who care for children every day see details that a doctor doesn't see in 20 minutes. If we don't learn to listen to these people, we're killing children through silence. The audience applauds. And in the middle of the audience, discreetly, a doctor watches with tears in her eyes. Gustavo continues to be intense. At work, even more. But at home, things change a bit. He realizes that not everything can be resolved through litigation. Not everything can be solved with money. Not everyone who disagrees with him is against him. He still thinks he did the right thing by suing. But one day he admits it to Verena. "If we didn't have Lourdes, maybe I would have overlooked some things," he says. "She was the break I didn't know I needed." Drag. Elisa doesn't disappear. She's being investigated by the council, facing legal proceedings, and suffering a stain on her reputation. He lost a patient, losing sleep at night. You lose your peace for a while. But she hasn't lost her desire to be a doctor. She reinvents herself, starts teaching classes to residents, and in every class about febrile seizures or afebrile seizures, she recounts, without mentioning names, "I had a case where the caregiver saw it before I did. I underestimated it. The child had a severe crisis. Since then, I never again call the concern of someone who is with the child every day an exaggeration." She transforms her own mistake into a warning for others. It is not complete redemption, but it's a responsibility. One day, years later, she receives a message on WhatsApp. Unknown number. "Hi, doctor. This is Lourdes. I just wanted to say that Miguel is studying, making a mess, and that you are part of this story. For good and for learning. May God bless your hand so you can take care of many more children without repeating the same mistakes. Lourdes." She reads, cries alone in the kitchen. And he replies with one line, "Thank you for telling the truth even when it hurt." Lourdes. And what about Lourdes? Lourdes buys a good bed, a simple wardrobe, a refrigerator that doesn't make deathly noises. Help your son get out of a dangerous debt. Enroll your granddaughter in a slightly better school. And yes, he sets aside some of his money to help a neighbor child pay for an expensive medical exam that the family couldn't afford. When signing the clinic form, she doesn't understand the name of the exam, but understand what you're doing. "Someone heard me when I screamed. Now I'm hearing someone else scream." She continues working. She won't become rich. She won't become famous. But it becomes a reference. On the street where he lives, someone says, "Well, if Lourdes says there's something wrong with the child, listen," because she can see it. Every now and then, lying in her new bed, she thinks, "Should I have spoken differently that day?" And the answer comes calmly. "No. You said what you saw, and that saved more lives than you can imagine." She is asleep. It's not a life like in a primetime soap opera, but it's a life with one thing that many millionaires don't have: clear conscience. And you? Where are you in this story? Ultimately, this wasn't just the story of a nanny. It was the story of a truth that was almost boxed up to fit into a legal process. A doctor who made a mistake but wasn't a monster. A family that suffered but also had the power to destroy or transform. And how, sometimes, the least educated person is the one who best understands the weight of the word truth. If this story made you think, then it has already served its purpose. If it were for the channel, I would close it like this. Subscribe to $1 Million Stories. Leave a like if you followed along this far. Comments. I choose the truth, even when it comes at a high price. And if you want, we can create another $1 Million Story together. About another theme, another character, another life that seems simple, until you see it up close.